On the 19th day of the first lunar month in the first year of the Wanli reign, Emperor Wanli Zhu Yijun looked at the iron triangle in front of him. The first ally had a friendly appearance and was the Empress Dowager of the Ming Dynasty. The second ally is just a eunuch, his duty is to kowtow. The third ally is a powerful minister, he looks domineering and revealing. Finally, everyone turned their gaze to me and asked what role I played. I look at my identity and say, I am the great emperor who neglects his duties. This book is also known as, I Have a Billion Little Hobbies, Emperor N's Broken Fist, Let Daming Be Great Again, keywords of the novel. I'm really not doing my job, with no pop-ups, I'm really not doing my job. Download the full text of, I'm really not doing my job, and read the latest chapters of, I'm really not doing my job. Chapter 1. King Assassination and Driving. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 King Assassination and Driving. We're in the water, we're in the water. Put out the fire. Catch the assassin, the one wearing the black robe is the assassin. The noise outside the hall woke up the drowsy Zhu Yijun. He opened his eyes in confusion and saw a large bed with a three-sided screen-shaped bed surround. The sandalwood was black with a purple hue, appearing ancient and profound, emitting an elegant luster. Under the candlelight, he could distinguish several carved five-clawed golden dragons. Hiss, it hurts so much. Zhu Yijun rubbed his forehead, as if he had bumped into it. His rubbing movements stopped for a moment, and he stared blankly at his tender hands, feeling a bit incredulous. They were all hands of a child. I had a big drink yesterday, but does it still have the effect of rejuvenation? He slowly stood up and looked around, with carved railings and painted buildings above his head and golden bricks everywhere at his feet. Behind the carved five-clawed golden dragon screen was a long bookshelf, with two crane-shaped palace lamps on either side. Under the ever-changing lights, smoke shrouded, and the cold air of spring blew past his nose with a sandalwood scent. Your Majesty, I apologize for the late arrival. Your Majesty, have you not been injured? A man with a clean face, dressed in a bright red eunuch uniform, hurriedly ran into the hall. The eunuch heard the commotion and rushed to the Qianqing palace at the fastest speed possible. He was running out of breath, and in the cold weather of late spring, two breath dragons were spraying from his nose. As the eunuch crossed the threshold, it seemed that he was running too fast and stumbled on it. He suddenly fell and rolled around on the ground, feeling very slippery. He knelt on the ground, crawling forward and saying with great sorrow, Your Majesty, I deserve to die for my sins. I came too late, Your Majesty. Zhu Yijun spoke almost instinctively and said, Is the companion here? He frowned and took a strong breath of air conditioning. His forehead began to ache faintly again, his head slightly swollen, and his dizziness surged in waves. Countless images filled his eyes, flashing rapidly. Your Majesty, are you okay? The eunuch kneeling on the ground quickly approached, trying to help Zhu Yijun's shaky body. But Zhu Yijun reached out and swung the eunuch's hand away, slowly sitting down on the armrest of the circular chair, and spoke, I'm fine, I just knocked a little. The eunuch trembled all over when he saw the situation, hanging his duckling throat and shouting loudly at the top of his lungs, Imperial physician, quickly pass on the Imperial physician. Your Majesty has been injured by an assassin. Report to the Empress Dowager quickly. How is my son? A noblewoman walked in from the door and urgently asked. 2 rows of palace maids followed behind her, standing quietly with palace lamps in their hands, motionless and hesitant to look up. The eunuch immediately knelt down again and said with a sorrowful expression, Report to Empress Dowager Zixing that the Imperial physician has been summoned. When I ran over, I didn't see the thief. Empress Dowager, these unruly officials and thieves are too rampant. How is my son? The noblewoman ignored the eunuch's greeting and quickly walked up to Zhu Yijun. She trembled and reached out her hand, holding on to the 10-year-old child's hand, slowly opening the wound. Fortunately, there is only a slightly imperceptible red mark. The vast flow of information in Zhu Yijun's mind finally came to an end, and the image in front of him no longer flickered. He understood the situation. He has traveled through time. Time travel became the supreme emperor of the Ming Dynasty, at the age of only 10. He traveled to the 19th day of the first month of the Wanli era. Last June, Emperor Longqing, the late emperor, left behind 3 auxiliary ministers: Zhang Juzheng, Gao Gong, and Gao Yi. By this time, Gao Yi had already passed away and Gao Gong had been expelled from the cabinet. 2 of the 3 auxiliary ministers had passed away, leaving only Zhang Juzheng. And the eunuch in front of him, with thin lips, a high and segmented nose, and a narrow and slightly sinister printing hall, was the great companion of the little emperor. Feng Bao, the eunuch in charge of printing in the palace, was the ancestor and supervisor of the imperial examination. The lady with concern on her face was the birth mother of the little emperor, Empress Dowager Cixingli, who had the emblem. At this time, Zhang Juzheng, Feng Bao, and Empress Dowager Li had formed an unbreakable political alliance, overseeing the affairs of the world. The young emperor, who was only 10 years old, was walking on thin ice and had doubts about the country. He was unable to govern personally and had little to do with the affairs of the court. His situation was extremely difficult, and Empress Dowager Li was extremely strict in her constraints. If she stayed up late and woke up late, she would be scolded. If she had a slight misconduct, Empress Dowager Li asked Zhang Juzheng to speak out and write a memorial to her own wrongdoing, asking the little emperor to kneel before the previous emperor's throne, recite it several times before agreeing to give up. The decree of self-punishment was not written by the emperor, and it can be considered ordinary. And the eunuchs in the palace also used Empress Dowager Li's authority to excessively manipulate and control the little emperor. At this moment, Zhu Yijun supported his head and looked at Feng Bao, who was extremely obedient. His eyes narrowed slightly, indicating that he was a proud and respectful servant. Feng Bao should not be a eunuch, he should become an actor. In front of Empress Dowager Li, this guy showed great respect and flattery, but in the memory of the little emperor, there was everywhere disgust and fear towards Feng Bao as his great companion. Excessive coercion and restraint refer to Feng Daban, who constantly uses Empress Dowager Li to scare the little emperor and falsely accuses him, portraying the little emperor as a mischievous troublemaker, which worries Empress Dowager Li. It is the expectation of every mother in the world to have a successful son, and Empress Dowager Li is no exception. Especially after Emperor Longqing passed away, the vast world was handed over to a 10-year-old child, and Empress Dowager Li was the first person in charge of educating the young emperor. Empress Dowager Li demanded stricter standards, which Zhu Yijun can understand. So this Feng Daban, pretending to be a fox and tiger, is enough to restrain the little emperor. What does it mean to set a trap for the little emperor? Once, Feng Daban sent a palace maid to touch the bed of the little emperor in the middle of the night. The next day, the little emperor woke up and realized something was wrong. As expected, Empress Dowager Li, who lived with the Qianqing palace, immediately learned about this matter and blamed the palace maid. The little emperor was brought to the front of the late emperor's throne, and the Empress Dowager knelt on the ground crying, while the little emperor also knelt on the ground crying. In just 10 years of memory, such incidents have occurred at least 3 times. Why did Feng Bao bully a 10-year-old child and set him up? It's actually quite simple. Even the little emperors are being pinched by him, and Empress Dowager Li can be fooled and deceived by him. Who in the palace dares to disobey his great companion Feng? Zhu Yijun can even understand the motivation behind this lackey's actions. Emperor Wanli could bear it, but Zhu Yijun couldn't bear it. Empress Dowager Li has been anxiously walking back and forth. Her footsteps seem a bit hasty. After such a big event happened in the palace, she felt a bit flustered for a moment. Most importantly, her own son managed to avoid this time. Can he avoid the next time? And there are high walls and deep courtyards in this palace, guarded by cavalry everywhere. How did that thief break into the Qianqing palace, and even startle the Holy Master? All these things left Empress Dowager Li feeling a bit at a loss. She was just a 27-year-old woman, not even in her prime. My husband left early and left such a great Ming Dynasty to his only 10-year-old son. Emperor Longqing, Long Yu, had been attending the banquet for 6 months. During this period, Empress Dowager Li had already done her best to protect the safety of the mother and son, but such a disaster still occurred. In the future, where should we go? The flames outside the palace have been completely extinguished, and the imperial physician has also been invited to the palace for pulse cutting. As soon as the imperial physician stopped, Empress Dowager Li hurriedly approached and asked, "Dr. Chen, how is my son?" The imperial physician quickly lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty's pulse can reach 4 or 5 in one breath. The pulse is neither floating nor sinking nor fast nor slow, neither strong nor weak nor large nor small, with a neat and calm rhythm that is not a big problem. A slight bump on your forehead will heal in no time." The doctor's expression hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he hesitated to speak. His pulse was indeed stable, and His Majesty was in good health. The injury to his forehead was healed after seeing him later. But the problem is, a 10-year-old child suddenly encounters such a dramatic change. In the heavily guarded palace, assassins break into the emperor's bedroom to assassinate him. As a young emperor who has been assassinated, the biggest problem is that his pulse is so stable. But can the imperial physician say this? Nature cannot. He is just an imperial physician, and the soup and medicine in the imperial hospital cannot even guarantee the health of the emperor. "Thank you, doctor." Empress Dowager Li gestured to the palace maids to take out an ingot of silver and reward the doctor. Looking at the swelling and redness on her child's forehead, Empress Dowager Li was saddened and pulled Zhu Yijun to her side. With a hint of crying in her tone, she whispered, "My hard-working son, let Wei Nyang see if it hurts her mouth." Zhu Yijun was embraced by the Empress Dowager and whispered, "Mother, the child is sleeping soundly." Suddenly, she smelled a foul odor. When she opened her eyes, she saw a strong man wearing a black robe standing in front of the bed, holding a dagger and stabbing it at the child. The child suddenly jumped up and dodged, flipping over the tables and chairs, and then hit his head. The palace maids and the little yellow gatekeepers outside the palace heard the commotion and rushed in. Before the child fainted, they only saw the assassin climb out of the window railing and escape. When they woke up again, Feng Daban came. "Mother, don't blame the child." Empress Dowager Li was immersed in sadness. After hearing Zhu Yijun speak like this, she stopped sobbing and asked in confusion, "Where did this start? Why did I blame my son for it?" Zhu Yijun looked at the table and chairs that had been knocked over on the ground with a heart full of sorrow, and only then said with a hint of fear, "Child, knocked over the tables and chairs in the palace. Please don't blame the child for being impolite, mother. If you knock over a table or chair, you will also face punishment. This is not a joke." Empress Dowager Li has extremely strict requirements for the words and actions of the little emperor. No matter what she does, she must meet the standards of an emperor. Even when walking, she cannot let the scattered jade hooks, jade pendants, jade honks, and teeth collide with her. She must step on all sides and have a dignified appearance. This kind of indecent behavior is often seen as disrespectful. Zhu Yijun is playing to his greatest advantage. He is only 10 years old and can pretend to be pitiful. Who is not an actor yet? My son. Empress Dowager Li felt even more sorrowful upon hearing this. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she hugged Zhu Yijun with great force. Tears dripped down her cheeks onto the little emperor. Empress Dowager Li's crying gradually subsided, only occasionally twitching. Her sadness reached its extreme, and she couldn't make a sound of crying. She just sobbed incessantly, feeling suffocated and unable to speak. The late emperor passed away early, leaving behind orphans and widows. The 10-year-old crown prince was in the cabinet, talking about how to govern the world. It seemed like he wanted to support the establishment of a feudal lord, and the mountains in the court were filled with criticism and fierce fighting. Now, the child, under the eyes of the Empress Dowager, has been assassinated by the king. This biological mother, Empress Dowager Zixing of the Ming Dynasty, lived in the Qianqing palace to take care of her children because the emperor was young. Surprisingly, an assassin broke into the Qianqing palace. These ministers are deeply grateful to the country and do not want to exhaust their loyalty to the Lord. They only know that they attach great importance to the powerful officials and despise the Lord. Now, they have even handed over knives. Empress Dowager Li held Zhu Yijun's head and said forcefully, "My son is not afraid, not afraid. I assure you to my mother that this kind of thing will not happen again. If it happens again, I will go all out with them for my mother. Not afraid, not afraid." The atmosphere had reached this point, and the actor Zhu Yijun forced a few tears and comforted, saying, "The child is the emperor of the Ming Dynasty. The child is not afraid, and there is no need for his mother to work hard. When the child grows up, the child will work hard with them. Don't cry, mother. If she cries again, the child will also cry." "My son," Empress Dowager Li heard with even greater sadness. "Feng Daban, where was Daban when I was assassinated?" Zhu Yijun asked suddenly as Empress Dowager Li was immersed in sadness. Empress Dowager Li suddenly raised her head, her eyes turning red, and she stared straight at Feng Bao. She sternly said, "Feng dying. Where were you when the emperor was attacked?" Dang refers to the golden decoration on the hat of a eunuch, meaning eunuch. An unbreakable and indestructible political alliance. From the experience of Zhu Yijun's 2 generations, this is a fallacy. The words, political alliance, and unbreakable, should not be put together. New book set sale, seeking collection, recommendation, and monthly pass. Don't raise books, everyone. Follow-up reading involves recommended positions, please, End of this chapter. Chapter 2. All Demons. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. All Demons. I was patrolling Empress Dowager Rensheng at the Xiqing Palace, and upon hearing any commotion, I immediately rushed over to ask for the Empress Dowager's guidance. Feng Bao looked at Empress Dowager Li with angry eyes and knelt down on the ground, answering the question logically with a hint of fear and determination in his tone. Feng Bao's work in the palace is naturally seamless. He said that when patrolling the palace prohibition in the Xiqing Palace, so many eunuchs can testify to Feng Bao. Zhu Yijun didn't think that with just one sentence, Feng Bao could be put to death. If he didn't have this kind of control, could Feng Bao be the ancestor of the Daming Palace, and the eunuch in charge of the Imperial seal? Since Feng Bao said he was patrolling security, he was patrolling security and did not slack off. What Zhu Yijun wanted was just a furious rebuke from Empress Dowager Li amidst her grief and anger. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it will take root, sprout, grow vigorously, and finally bloom and bear fruit. Empress Dowager Li has placed great trust in Feng Baotai, and this trust has reached the point of being left unattended and even relying on him in everything. Feng Baotai, leveraging Empress Dowager Li's authority, has been rampant in this palace, even bullying the emperor. At this time, Empress Dowager Li was in charge of all affairs inside and outside the palace. When Empress Dowager Li announced the recall of Gao Gong, with a decree of righteousness, Gao Gong, the head of the 3 auxiliary ministers, immediately lost all power. Empress Dowager Li holds such power, how can she fully trust someone? Pop. A crisp slap echoed through the entire Qianqing Palace, and Feng Bao, the ancestor of the Daming Palace, knelt on the ground and forcefully tugged at his left cheek. This mouth was so loud that even the 2 rows of palace maids who dared not move like zombies couldn't help but raise their eyebrows and take a glance, but only one glance, so they didn't dare to look more. Since Feng Bao gained power, he has been rampant in the palace. When has he suffered such injustice? This mouth really hit the face, and half of the left face swelled up. Bang! Feng Bao tugged hard on his right face again, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth, and said to himself, "Damn it." Before the late emperor left, he reminded me to be careful. I was very careful, but I still missed one and was taken advantage of by someone. Bang! Feng Bao tugged at his left face again, and blood flowed out of his mouth this time. He continued, "I'm not careful. As a servant of the Empress Dowager and His Majesty, I have let down the Empress Dowager's trust and let the villains break into the palace. It's my dereliction of duty. If something happens now, I should die forever." Bang! Feng Bao slapped his right face, not only failing to reduce his strength, but even harshly, even beating his blood out. He spoke fiercely. It must be that Gao Gong was dissatisfied with his dismissal, that he secretly conspired against the villain. If he did something that these gods abandoned together, I will definitely find evidence. Pop! Damn it, I'm on the brink of death. I'm still thinking about how Gao Gong will depose His Majesty. I don't hesitate to die this despicable life, but when I come down here and meet the late emperor, how should I respond? Pop! They dare to assassinate this time, but I don't know what will happen next time. Even if I die, I will uproot this villain and the person behind him. Pa 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 pa. Exciting, very exciting. Old love, confession, forgiveness, pleading, all in one go, flowing smoothly, just like the slippery somersault he made at the door. Then he kept tugging at his own mouth, as if Empress Dowager Li wouldn't let go, and Feng Bao was about to forcefully kill himself. Zhu Yijun discovered that Feng Bao was indeed the best actor among all the best actors, and this passage is absolutely accurate. First, he moved out the late emperor. This is love. As an old official of the royal family, Feng Bao naturally had the same heart as the Empress Dowager and the little emperor, and took himself out of this matter. Feng's current status and power rely entirely on the appreciation of the late emperor and the Empress Dowager. Without the late emperor and the Empress Dowager, could Feng Bao have what he is today? Then comes confession. The master usually doesn't like hard-talking servants. If they are wrong, they are wrong. Only by admitting their mistakes well can there be a glimmer of hope. Feng Bao slapped himself hard, one at a time. Apologize and reveal the suspect, Gao Gong. As the first of the three auxiliary ministers, Gao Gong spoke about how a 10-year-old child would govern the world after Emperor Longqing's visit, which touched the scales of Empress Dowager Li. Later, Gao Gong submitted a petition to seize the power of the Imperial Household Department. The next day, Gao Gong was deposed by Empress Dowager Li with a righteous decree. It is reasonable for Gao Gong to hold a grudge against the emperor and the Empress Dowager, and then secretly collude with passers-by to seek personal revenge. Feng Bao's slaps, combined with these words, kept saying he deserved to die, yet he begged for mercy every time. All right, stop fighting. Empress Dowager Li finally waved her hand, gesturing for Feng Bao to stop, but Empress Dowager Li did not let Feng Bao get up. A major incident of king assassination and driving occurred in the palace. Even though Empress Dowager Li trusted Feng Bao again, she couldn't help but suspect him. Does this matter have anything to do with the seemingly loyal great jewel in front of her? Empress Dowager Li's fingers unconsciously tapped on the armrest, clearly reflecting on Feng Bao's words. Zhu Yijun looked at Feng Bao's swollen face, squinted slightly, and added, Feng Daban worked hard, the late emperor went on a great journey, and everything in the palace depends on his management. The Imperial Censorate relies on Big Companion, the various departments of the East Factory rely on Big Companion, I rely on Big Companion for reading and writing, and even the Palace Security Patrol relies on Big Companion. Big Companion's busy affairs and momentary negligence are understandable. Zhu Yijun said that he didn't care, but inside and outside of what he said, it was all about calculation. Since the Empress Dowager has given Feng Bao such power, there are no taboos when walking in the palace, but Feng Bao has done his job like this. A momentary oversight is understandable. Feng Bao pulled his tongue a few times and wanted to turn this matter over. Don't even think about it. Feng Bao knelt on the ground, burying his head and gritting his teeth. Why is this little emperor so difficult to deal with today? Today, the little emperor bumped into him. Did he open his mind or did he connect the Ren and do meridians? These words may seem like pleasant words, but there is no excuse for them. Every word is more heart-wrenching, one pit after another. If you answer a little incorrectly, you'll end up in a big mess and end up losing your life here. Your Majesty. I am unjustly accused. Your Majesty has said so, and I can only apologize with death. Feng Bao suddenly kowtowed to apologize. The emperor's words directly shifted the blame from negligence to the heinous crime of usurping divine weapons. His Majesty may seem to be referring to his hard work and high achievements, but he is referring to his immense power. Who is the master in this palace? Bang bang. Feng Bao kept knocking his head, blood oozing from his forehead. Empress Dowager Li hesitated slightly and looked at Feng Bao, her face slightly changing. The speaker had intention, while the listener had intention. Empress Dowager Li realized a problem. Feng Bao had too much power in this palace. If Feng Bao wanted to harm her and the little emperor, wouldn't it be easy? Is it too dangerous to put all the eggs in one basket? Bang! Feng Bao saw that the little emperor was still not forgiving, and he forcefully knocked on the ground. This time, the knock was extremely heavy, and Feng Bao's body collapsed on the ground, his hands spread out, and he lay straight on the ground. Empress Dowager Li then turned to the nearby physician who had not left and said coldly, "Dr. Chen, take a look. The imperial physician is sweating profusely, what have he done?" On duty, he was dragged into the palace. First, he examined the emperor's pulse. A child who suddenly experienced a calm change in the heart lake, and another one who pulled his own mouth to the point where it was covered in blood, a big pendant that could knock himself unconscious. Dr. Chen has decided to submit his resignation after tonight. This is all a land of demons and cultivators, and he doesn't want to come in his lifetime. Feng Daying's heart was slow, her breathing was shallow and slow, her muscles were weak, and her pupils were slightly dilated. Feng Daying had knocked herself out. "Empress Dowager, Your Majesty, you can't knock anymore. If you knock again, it will really kill you." Dr. Chen examined the wound and couldn't help but tremble. People are all seeking benefits and avoiding harm. Biting the tongue is not enough to commit suicide, because subconsciously releasing it will cause pain. Feng Bao finally used all his strength to kowtow, rushing to knock himself to death in the Qianqing palace. Is this still human? Stop bleeding. Empress Dowager Li seemed impatient and gestured to the imperial physician for diagnosis and treatment. Looking at Empress Dowager Li's expression, Zhu Yijun knew that she was somewhat aware of the problem. It was not that Feng Bao could not use it, but rather that she could not use it without restrictions like before. Feng Bao, without a doubt, is a ruthless person. Even if he is not a ruthless person, he cannot make a name for himself in this palace. However, Feng Bao is still not ruthless enough, otherwise there would not be such a big basket coming out of this palace to assassinate the king. "Empress Dowager, Your Majesty, the assassin has been caught." A eunuch and a cavalry rushed to the door, shouting loudly. The eunuch named Zhang Hong, with a broad forehead, a straight face, and a high nose bridge, was covered in dirt. His clothes on his arms had already been punctured, and he was dripping with blood. The wound was deep and visible, with blood pouring down his arms, making him look quite permeable. And another Jinyui, dressed in a flying fish suit, was named Zhu Shixiao, the younger brother of Duke Zhu Shizhong of Qinghua. Zhu Shixiao was the commander of the great Ming Dynasty's Jinyui, also known as the detective officer of the Northern Governor's Office of the Ming Dynasty's Jinyui, also known as the Tiki. The leader of the Tiki was known as the Tishuai. Empress Dowager Li sat up straight and said, "Come in and talk. I would like to pay my respects to the Empress Dowager and your majesty. The two of them entered the door and knelt on the ground, respectfully paying their respects. Zhu Shixiao knelt on the ground and glanced at Feng Bao before speaking. Your majesty, the villain dug out the Xuanxi alley of the Qianqing palace and went out of the Xuanzhen gate through the dog hole, hiding under the jujube tree at the doorstep. Eunuch Zhang Hong heard the shouting and woke up. As soon as he went out, he saw the villain. Zhang Hong approached to inquire and engaged in a fight with the villain. Zhang Hong shouted several times, but the villain stabbed Zhang Hong's arm and wanted to seize the way. Zhang Hong then went forward and grabbed the villain's black robe. He arrived with a cavalry and subdued the villain. As the commander-in-chief, Zhu Shixiao reported on the process of arrest, and eunuch Zhang Hong lived at his home in Langxia. The house under the corridor was where the young eunuchs lived, on the edge of the palace. Zhang Hong heard a commotion and immediately got up, just in time to see a black shadow lurking under the jujube tree. Upon hearing Zhu Shixiao's report, Zhu Yijun said to the eunuch who had not yet left, "Eunuch, quickly help Zhang Hong bandage one or two." "Mother, Zhang Hong deserves a reward for his meritorious service in capturing the assassin." The wound on Zhang Hong's arm was extremely deep, and blood flowed like no money. Zhang Hong's face had turned pale, and if he didn't stop the bleeding, he might have lost his life. Zhang Hong was selling his fortune just to show his loyalty in front of the Emperor and Empress Dowager, and to win the opportunity to rise to power. He just died. In this world, there are many more painful things than death. Zhu Yijun is probing his own boundaries of power. Dr. Chen swallowed his throat again. The doctor was kind and stopped the bleeding for Feng Bao who had just woken up. He immediately went to examine Zhang Hong's wound, opened the medical box, cleaned the wound, and bandaged Zhang Hong at the same time. This kind of wound needs to be stitched. At this point, it can only be lightly bandaged and then stitched after speaking. Dr. Chen doesn't understand. What are the people inside the palace wall? Are they all demons who don't know how to hurt or fear? Zhu Yijun has already requested a favor for Zhang Hong, without further ado, waiting for Empress Dowager Li's decision. Seeking recommendation, seeking investment, anyway, seeking all kinds of support for new books. Everyone must not raise books. Pursuing reading is very important. Now the court arranges for recommendations and new book lists to be read in full. Ahem. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Emperors learn martial arts and neglect their business. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Emperors learn martial arts and neglect their business. Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhang Hong, tilted her head and whispered to a palace maid a few times before speaking up, Zhang Hong is brave and loyal in capturing thieves. In the future, come to the Qianqing palace and become a eunuch. Follow your majesty, and if there are any more criminals breaking into the palace, you must protect the emperor's safety. Empress Dowager Xia Longen, your majesty Xia Longen. In the future, I will treat you like a liver and brain, protecting your majesty's safety. Zhang Hong knew he had made the right bet, but he persisted in refusing to bandage himself and come to face the Holy Spirit, delaying his injury. Isn't it just to seize this great opportunity? If it weren't for this, how could he have jumped from a small eunuch in the corridor to a eunuch in the Qianqing palace? From then on, he no longer had to be called a servant or a minor. When facing the holy face, he could become a vassal. The eunuch of the Qianqing palace was a high-ranking official and qualified to be a vassal. The reason why Empress Dowager Li whispered to the palace maids was entirely because Zhang Hong had a somewhat familiar face. When she asked the palace maids around her, Zhang Hong was indeed an old member of the Prince Yu's mansion. During the reign of Emperor Jiajing, Emperor Longqing was still Prince Yu. Zhang Hong, who was 9 years old, had already been working in Prince Yu's mansion. Prince Yu ascended to the throne as emperor, and Chen Hong and Feng Bao had great influence. Not only did they care for the old people, but they also suppressed the elderly in Prince Yu's mansion several times. Zhang Hong, as an old member of the hidden mansion, actually mixed up with some small eunuchs in the Langxia family. Empress Dowager Li's decision was not only due to Zhu Yijun's request for a reward, but also because she had already realized that the power in Feng Bao's hands was too great. If this assassination attempt were to assassinate the emperor, would it really be Feng Bao's intention to eliminate dissidents? There is a Chen Hong living in the corridor of the palace, and there is also a high arch outside the palace, which is the enemy of Feng Bao's life and death. An adult holding a murder weapon assassinates a 10-year-old child, yet he hasn't succeeded yet. Is it that they didn't kill, or are they not willing to kill at all? Taking advantage of the little emperor is something that Empress Dowager Li has decided not to allow to happen. Zhang Hong was severely injured in order to catch the thief, and he was also an elderly man from the Prince Yu's mansion. He had to hide in his old mansion and provide close protection for the emperor, which was extremely suitable. Zhang Hong kowtowed to show gratitude. The injury on his arm must be treated as soon as possible. He followed the imperial physician closely and went to the side hall. The sewing needle hurts a bit. Bite on this piece of cloth and shout out if it hurts. Dr. Chen handed Zhang Hong a piece of cloth and instructed. Dr. Chen did not bring any anesthesia, and the needle and thread passed through the flesh, which was not an ordinary pain. During the entire process of sewing, Zhang Hong bit on a piece of cloth, which was so painful that he was sweating all over. The pain was so painful that he was about to bite through the piece of cloth, but he didn't let out a single cry of sorrow because he knew it wasn't the time to sell out. The Empress Dowager and His Majesty were both speaking in the inner hall, and he couldn't disturb him. Zhang Hong was clear on when to sell poorly and when not to disturb. Feng Bao had already woken up, and his face was extremely ugly. The Empress Dowager and Emperor still did not let him get up, so he could only kneel. The ranking of seats in this palace is not based on seniority, but solely on the closeness to the emperor. This eunuch in the Qianqing palace is closest to the emperor. This Zhang Hong, with a bloody arm and a holy face, immediately became a eunuch of the Qianqing palace. How could Feng Bao not hate him? But Feng Bao can't act either. It's just Zhang Hong, can Chen Hong still be difficult to deal with? Wait until the matter of King Assassination's murder is resolved, and then slowly discuss it. Half of Zhu Yijun's focus was on Feng Bao, while the other half was on Zhang Hong. After all, this person was as ruthless as Feng Bao, and his blood-dripping arm was truly astonishing. After waiting for a moment, Zhu Yijun didn't hear any screams. He knew that Zhang Hong had excellent temperament, skills, and patience, and the key was that he could handle the importance of priority. Tishuai, how can villains wait? Empress Dowager Li's softness faded away, and her eyes became particularly sharp. Empress Dowager Li was originally an ordinary palace maid in the Prince Yu's mansion. Over the years, she struggled to become the Empress Dowager with the emblem of the great Ming Dynasty, known as the Zixing. During the Emperor Longqing's visit, Empress Dowager Li was mentally exhausted and her child was assassinated, causing her to panic. At this moment, she regained her senses and put on the Empress Dowager's airs. At this moment, she is not her mother, but Empress Dowager Daming. After careful consideration, Zhu Shixiao bowed and said, "When I arrived, I was in a hurry. I would like to inquire briefly. This person confessed to be the Southern Army, Qi family army, under the command of General Qi Jiguang. I don't believe him very much." Zhu Yijun furrowed his brows, and the people of the Qi family army went into the palace to assassinate him. Zhu Shixiao, as the commander-in-chief and a high-ranking official, was a rather awkward presence. The high-ranking official declined over the years, but with the erosion of the capital camp, the power of the 5 army commanders' office was transferred to the Ministry of War, and the high-ranking official had little say in the court. As the commander of the Royal Guards, he continuously transferred the power of the Royal Guards to the East Factory due to its large size. Zhu Shixiao's identity is a double awkwardness of embarrassment and awkwardness. Originally, Zhu Shixiao didn't want to say much. When someone caught him, he had already fulfilled his responsibilities. According to convention, the culprit naturally had to be interrogated by the East Factory. As a cavalry leader, Zhu Shixiao had already fulfilled his duties. However, as the last bit of dignity of Sun Gui, Zhu Shixiao still expressed his attitude slightly, assassin, not Qi Jejun. Empress Dowager Li asked, why doesn't Marshal T believe it? Zhu Shixiao bowed and said, the Qi family army doesn't dig into dog holes. If it were in front of the Qi family army, eunuch Zhang Hong would have died long ago. The Qi family army's reputation for being skilled in warfare spread far and wide, and it was known as the Dinghai Divine Needle during the Jiajing, Longqing, and Wanli periods. The Qi family army marches southward against Japanese pirates and northward against barbarians. The Qi family army has strict discipline and is well known throughout the world. Any soldier who engages in any disruptive behavior during the expedition will be beheaded and shown to the public, without any tolerance. He is the undisputed hero of the world. Such a brave man, a towering and upright man, drilling a dog hole, holding a murder weapon and entangled with a eunuch, unable to escape. With such cartilage and skills, Zhu Shixiao did not believe that the villain was the Qi family army. Empress Dowager Li also did not believe it. In the late Jiajing and Longqing periods, the heroic achievements of the Qi family army were transmitted to the court, which was clearly remembered by Empress Dowager Li when her husband was one of the few who had a happy smile on his face. If the Qi family army were such a good person, what kind of enemy would they pacify and reject? Then let the case be handed over to the chief marshal for interrogation. Empress Dowager Li nodded. The Qinghua mansion is one of the 5 hereditary dukes of the Ming Dynasty, and has always been loyal. Since Zhu Shixiao arrested the villain, this case will naturally be handed over to the chief cavalry for interrogation. I obey the order. Zhu Shixiao looked at Feng Bao, who was still kneeling on the ground, and finally took orders to handle the task. Feng Bao has always been cautious and delicate in his character. It is likely that something happened in the palace this time, and the Empress Dowager no longer trusts Feng Bao as usual. Mother, my child wants to learn martial arts, Zhu Yijun said, looking at Zhu Shixiao with big arms and round waist, blinking his big eyes and eagerly looking at Empress Dowager Li. Empress Dowager Li touched Zhu Yijun's head and said, do you know that practicing martial arts is extremely difficult? Can you bear that hardship? It's better not to learn. Zhu Yijun said with great conviction, Mother, I have heard that Emperor Gao, the founder of the Ming Dynasty, immediately seized the world, and his divine martial arts ruled the country. Emperor Wen, the founder of the Ming Dynasty, was even more like an emperor on horseback. He personally launched 5 expeditions to the Tatars, demonstrating extraordinary bravery and martial prowess. He succeeded to the throne as the Grand Tutor, and should follow the example of his ancestors and ancestors. If such an assassination occurs again, the child does not seek to kill the enemy, only seeks self-protection. Child, not afraid of hardship. The emperor studied martial arts and neglected his official duties. If as usual, Zhu Yijun's proposal to learn martial arts will inevitably attract Empress Dowager Li's reprimand. But today, Zhu Yijun first proposed the ancestral method, which was the highest political correctness of the Ming Dynasty. In addition, with the assassination incident, the little emperor could only be subdued. At this time, he proposed to learn martial arts, and it was natural. Zhu Yijun really wants to learn martial arts, of course, hoping to tear a small hole in the dense fog and information cocoon and touch the military power. Does Tianzi have seed? Those with strong soldiers and strong horses reside there. After a moment of contemplation, Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhu Shixiao and said, Marshal T, would you like to teach the emperor martial arts? Zhu Shixiao doesn't want to, not at all. Swords and swords have no eyes. Once the emperor is injured, twisted, knocked, or touched, even if his majesty does not blame him, the Empress Dowager can understand that the ministers in the court and the spitting stars can drown Zhu Shixiao, and even the Qinghua mansion will be implicated. Daming Xuangui's face had long fallen into the mud, and anyone could step on it. The emperor wants to neglect his official duties, but Zhu Shixiao doesn't. Empress Dowager Rong reported that your majesty has orders and Empress Dowager has orders. However, I, the governor, was appointed as a cavalry. The official duties were complicated, and there was a major case of assassinating the king and driving that needed to be investigated. I am worried that there may be some inefficiencies, and I am afraid it will be difficult to handle them. Zhu Shixiao chose to politely refuse. Mother, then don't make things difficult for Tianwei. Zhu Yijun shook his head upon hearing this and showed a slightly bitter smile. He looked at Empress Dowager Li with regret, his eyes full of grievances. Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhu Yijun's innocent gaze, then at the injury on Zhu Yijun's forehead. How frightened should her son be when facing that villain? If it weren't for the child's quick wit and opening his eyes before the assassin's assassination, wouldn't the newly crowned emperor of Daming, who has been reigning for less than 7 months, be doomed to die? Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhu Shixiao with great solemnity and said, Marshal T, the high-ranking officials in the court have monopolized power, and have taken away all the authority and blessings of the court. The emperor is not allowed to be in charge, and we, the mother and son, are frightened and restless. Nowadays, even the emperor has been attacked by assassins, and we are honored to receive the emperor's favor. Such a small matter, Marshal T, cannot shirk responsibility. Zhu Shixiao's face changed a few times and he knelt down on one knee, shouting loudly, I dare not. I dare not refuse, it's not that I don't want to refuse. Zhu Shixiao expressed very clearly that Wu Sun had already declined. As the younger brother of Duke Cheng, Zhu Shixiao naturally participated less if he could. However, when the Empress Dowager questioned in person, Zhu Shixiao could no longer refuse. If we refuse again, it will be even more difficult for the Qinghua mansion to remove the big hat of disloyalty, unfilial piety, and lack of attention from civil officials. From tomorrow onwards, the emperor will follow Tianwei to learn martial arts, and this matter has been decided. Empress Dowager Li pondered for a moment before giving the order that if her son encounters another villain, at least there will be a chance to escape. Zhu Shixiao can only accept orders. Zhu Shixiao left with the cavalry, and Chen Tai bandaged and instructed Zhang Hong. He also left with the cavalry. Apart from the palace maids, only Empress Dowager Li, Zhu Yijun, Zhang Hong, and Feng Bao kneeling on the ground remained in the Qianqing palace. Empress Dowager Li leaned back in her chair and looked at Feng Bao for a long time before saying, Feng Dazhuang. The assassination of the king of assassination has caused a great calamity. The palace is heavily guarded, with 5 steps and 1 guard, and 10 steps and 1 post. The palace walls are high and deep. How did this villain step by step enter the Qianqing palace? Of course, there was an insider inside the palace. Who exactly is it? Feng Daying is the head of the East Factory, and the North Town Governor's office is investigating the case. Feng Daying should not go, and it is only reasonable to uncover this insider. At that time, it should be compared with this villain's case, and it will be clear what the culprit's origins are. What does Feng Daying think? Upon hearing that the Empress Dowager had brought up a case, Feng Bao knelt on the ground and gritted his teeth, saying, the Empress Dowager's words are reasonable. I will do my best to supervise them. Even if we dig 3 feet deep, we must also find these dog-like creatures that eat inside and outside, and give them an explanation to the Empress Dowager and His Majesty. Well, let's go a little later. I'm afraid we'll end up dying. Empress Dowager Li nodded and waved her hand, gesturing for Feng Bao to step down from the office. Zhu Yijun remained silent, smacking Empress Dowager Li's statement that she had died unexpectedly. The meaning was clear. Feng Bao had to be alive to handle this task, and if anyone in the palace died unexpectedly, Feng Bao was determined not to escape the involvement. If he can't do this job well again, can Feng Bao still be alive? Empress Dowager Rensheng is here, a small yellow door shouted loudly, hanging a duckling's throat. Zhu Yijun looked at the door, Empress Dowager Rensheng. At this time, there were two Empress Dowagers in the Ming Dynasty, one of whom was Empress Dowager Cixing, the birth mother of the little emperor, one is the legitimate mother of the little emperor, Empress Dowager Rensheng Chen. Chen Shi was the stepmother of Emperor Longqing. After Emperor Longqing ascended the throne, she became Empress Chen. After Emperor Longqing's grand visit, according to the tradition of the Ming Dynasty, he added the emblem of Rensheng and honored her as Empress Dowager. Chen is harmless because although she is beautiful, she cannot be favored. Instead, she was expelled from Cunning Palace and moved to another place to advise Emperor Longqing. The most important thing is Empress Dowager Chen, who has no children or daughters under her knees, which is the greatest cornerstone of peaceful coexistence between the two Empresses Dowagers. Pay respects to the Empress Dowager. A group of palace maids and eunuchs quickly knelt and bowed. Empress Dowager Chen, holding on to her skirt, hurriedly walked in. As soon as she entered, she came to the front of the little emperor, carefully examined her, and finally breathed a sigh of relief, saying, "Is there any other injury besides the one on her forehead?" "Sister, did the emperor let the imperial physician see it?" Empress Dowager Chen looked at Empress Dowager Li and asked anxiously. Empress Dowager Li smiled and said, "Sister, I have seen it and it's okay." Chen breathed a heavy sigh of relief and said, "As long as it's okay, as long as it's okay. God bless the emperor, God bless the great Ming. The injury on the forehead is almost healed, so I just knocked it off." Zhu Yijun stood up straight and said, "The villain has been captured by Tianwei. His mother has ordered Feng Daban to find an insider. This case will be resolved soon, so there is no need for his mother to worry." Empress Dowager Chen's biological mother was called her mother, while Empress Dowager Li's biological mother was called her mother. This was during the Ming Dynasty. Counting back to the Song Dynasty, when a prince called her biological mother, he could only call her sister. Zhu Yijun briefly explained the situation, and the Empress Dowagers of the two palaces began to communicate, guessing who was the mastermind behind the scenes. They kept guessing, but there was no answer. High arches. Zhang Juzheng. Feng Bao. Or who? The launch of the new book requires the strong support of all readers. Every click, recommendation, monthly pass, investment, and follow-up reading from readers are very important to Xiaowu, especially since follow-up reading affects the arrangement of recommendation slots. During the new book period, it is important not to keep books. Ahem. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Imperial Franchise. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Imperial Franchise. This damning palace is leaking air everywhere, no different from a sieve. The longest living emperor of the Ming Dynasty was Emperor Taizu Gao, Zhu Yuanzhang, at the age of 71. The second was Emperor Qingzu Wen, Zhu Di, at the age of 65. The third was the grandfather of Zhu Yijun, the emperor of the Ming Dynasty's cultivation of immortality, and the emperor of Jiajing, who spent his days taking various pills, at the age of 60. No other emperor lived to be over 60 years old. Due to the level of palace fighting among Emperor Jiajing and the old Taoist, as well as the attempted assassination of the old Taoist by palace maids. What kind of dangerous place is this palace? Other emperors, on the other hand, have their own ways of dying. They either mix the medicine of tigers and wolves with wine, or they don't know how to swim and fall into the water. Otherwise, it's unclear, and there aren't many who end well. The Ming Emperor is so absurd that he can't even end well. There are also those who even historians cannot write, such as the Ming Dynasty Emperor Zhu Qiyu, whose historical records can only provide one word for death and leave it unresolved. It's not uncommon for anything strange to happen in this damning palace. Mother and mother, it's already late and the child is tired. There will be a lesson and a feast tomorrow. Zhu Yijun's innocent eyes signaled to the two empresses to continue chatting, as the day was about to break. Upon hearing these words, Empress Dowager Li and Empress Chen both stood up. Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhu Yijun's forehead again before her eyes turned red, and she said, "I need to do my homework, and I also need to go to the Imperial banquet. It's been hard for my son. Go to bed now." Empress Dowager Chen said with an unbearable expression, "Why don't we stop for a day tomorrow? Your Majesty has been so frightened, and it won't be a big deal to rest for a day. The ministers in the court can still use this matter to criticize your Majesty, can't they? A group of grand officials know they are holding on to it all day long, and they can't do anything to confine your Majesty in those regulations. This can't be done, that can't be done." After a long silence, Empress Dowager Li looked at Zhu Yijun and said extremely helplessly, "Sister, I can't rest." Upon hearing this, Empress Dowager Chen remained silent. She knew that Empress Dowager Li was telling the truth, and there was little doubt about the country. How could this little emperor be so easy to become? Alas! The two empresses looked at each other silently, with only two sighs. Even if they were in such a terrible situation, the young emperor still had to attend daily classes and feasts. However, Zhu Yijun's face was still full of innocence. This small skin bag had a lot of disguising qualities. In the Ming Dynasty, where demons were everywhere, everything had to be cautious and cautious. In fact, he has another way of living, which is to follow the example of Emperor Wanli in history, and to be meticulous in everything. Zhu Yijun refused to compromise, nor was he willing to compromise. He was bullied by eunuchs, civil servants, or even jinnu, so it was not appropriate for him as the emperor. He doesn't want it, his thoughts are not clear. After the two empresses dowagers left, Zhu Yijun stared at the plaque hanging high in the Qianqing Palace, which read 4 large characters. Respecting the heavenly Dharma ancestor. This is the ancestral motto left by the Ming Dynasty. Respecting, following, and imitating, these 4 words mean. The way of walking in heaven is called respecting heaven. Shi Zhu Yu Hui is known as the Fa Zhu. Zhu Yijun's learning of martial arts is naturally a lack of skill and dedication, not the right path. However, when he applied the teachings of his ancestors, he truly touched the corners of military power. Just this sign of reverence for the heavenly ancestor, in a few decades, it will be replaced by the upright and bright, written in Manchu and Chinese by the Qing Jinnu of the Tartars. Zhu Yijun stood straight, staring at the sign. Calculating the time, there are still 40.1 years left in the Battle of Saru. Time is completely enough. He accepted his identity as the little emperor and set a lower limit for himself. He only has 1 breath left, which is to climb, bite with his teeth, and crush Jinnu. This Ming dynasty can be destroyed by the people, but not by the establishment of slaves. To make Daming great again, the road is long and obstructed, the road needs to be walked step by step, and the food needs to be taken 1 bite at a time. Compared to the grand goal of making Daming great again, first of all, clean up your surroundings. Zhang Hong, Zhu Yijun looked at the 4 big characters of Emperor Jingtian and suddenly spoke up. "I'm here," Zhang Hong quickly replied. Today, the performance of the little emperor was in the eyes of Zhang Hong. Feng Bao, who was usually trusted, surprisingly played in such a way that he was almost knocked to death before passing the level. Feng Bao was seriously injured, and with some strength, he was afraid to die directly. Empress Dowager Li has always trusted Feng Bao. Whatever Feng Bao said, Empress Dowager Li believed everything. If it were only Feng Bao and Empress Dowager Li, Feng Bao would have been so eloquent that he might have just slapped him a few times and managed to pass the level. What happened today is obviously closely related to the little emperor in front of us. The usually submissive little emperor is very different from before. Scratching the floor, "It's all blood," said Zhu Yijun with a hint of indifference. Several eunuchs behind Zhang Hong immediately started wiping the floor, wishing to lick the blood off the ground with their tongues. These eunuchs all paid homage to Zhang Hongyi's father, all surnamed Zhang. Zhu Yijun looked at the plaque of Emperor Jingtian and said coldly, "You deliberately endured the pain and refused to bandage the face of the Holy Spirit, just to gain a chance to stand out. You have won." Zhang Hong's heart stiffened and he said more respectfully, "Your Majesty, Tianwei, I cannot escape your Majesty's wise eyes with my small actions. Although the little emperor is small, it does not mean that he is easy to deceive." Zhu Yijun continued, "I can see it, the Empress Dowager can see it, and Feng Daban can naturally see it too. You are now a eunuch in the Qianqing Palace, which is equivalent to opposing Feng Daban with a clear understanding of swords and spears. That is his power. By catching the assassin and taking a large piece from him, can he spare you in the future? Feng Daban is my great companion, and you are also an old member of the hidden residence and one of my great companions. Feng Daban is the lord of the palace, and you were also the lord. Feng Daban is currently in the Qing Palace, and I have sent you to clear the palace. Do you know what to do when you take my imperial decree? The seat holder is a political relationship, similar to the seat holder. In more layman's terms, the seat holder in the palace is a community of interests maintained by the eunuch serving as the father of the eunuch, with everyone prospering and losing. Zhang Hong is a retired residence, and naturally there are people joining in. I know, but if the Empress Dowager knows, it's probably. Zhang Hong hesitated for a moment, obviously still worried about the Empress Dowager's reaction. Zhu Yijun interrupted Zhang Hong's words and asked calmly, "Who are you?" "Your Majesty's claws and teeth," Zhang Hong replied without any hesitation. "Your Majesty is still young, but his back looks particularly stable. Ambition is not in youth," and Empress Dowager Li also said that Zhang Hong would follow the emperor in the future. Zhang Hong only had one master, and that was the emperor in front of him. Zhu Yijun turned around and looked at Zhang Hong with utmost solemnity, saying, "If the Empress Dowager blames me, I will share with her that you are my henchman, and the Empress Dowager will blame me first. If I get scolded first, then you will be beaten. Do you understand?" "I understand." Zhang Hong finally understood Your Majesty's words, whose claws and teeth really mean what? Your Majesty is not very old, but he sees through more than him. Zhang Hong is aware of his identity and he is the Emperor's minion, which is a subordinate relationship. The Emperor's intention is very clear. If the Empress Dowager really blames her, the Emperor will come forward and speak up. Regardless of whether the Emperor will come forward or not, the Emperor has already said it, that's enough. At least Your Majesty is willing to make a promise and speak up. As for whether or not to fulfill his promise, Zhang Hong has never begged the master to fulfill it. Zhu Yijun walked up to the bed, flipped it over, and handed a signboard to Zhang Hong, saying, "I don't want it. The palace maid who grooms me tomorrow, the eunuch who serves me in my daily life and studies, and the little yellow gate who guides me are all people of Feng Daban. Do you understand? Go find my martial arts teacher, Marshal Zhu Shixiao, and transfer 50 cavalry to the Qing Palace. Who dares to disobey orders, be punished for plotting rebellion, and be executed without mercy. Do you understand?" "I understand. I understand." Zhang Hong clenched the token and said forcefully. Zhang Hong only then realized why his master insisted on seeking the apprenticeship of Tishuai Zhu Shixiao to learn martial arts. It turned out that he wanted to use it here. Zhang Hong held the token in his hand and took orders to leave. He was a very easy person to serve, willing to take responsibility, and even provided specific and clear goals and methods for execution. All he needed to do was execute them. Zhu Yijun looked at Zhang Hong's back with a thoughtful expression on his face. Zhang Hong was able to endure the excruciating pain and dripped blood all the way from his home in the corridor to the Qianqing Palace. He was a ruthless person who supported him. It was not difficult for him to handle things well. If he held the Emperor's token, he would not be able to handle such matters well. Then Zhang Hong should not think about fighting against Feng or becoming an ancestor. He should go to the back mountain to find a rope to hang himself. As for the scope of the Qin palace, it is not large or small, only the people around him. If Empress Dowager Li refuses this, Zhu Yijun will have to make other plans. Zhu Yijun stood behind the indestructible shield of imperial power, carefully probing the boundaries of his own power. He must take the initiative and fight. There is only one outcome if there is no dispute, which is that after Zhang Juzheng's death, the courtiers will launch a counter-attack against him. As the supreme emperor of the Ming Dynasty, he can only follow the opinions of the courtiers and settle both Zhang Juzheng and his new policies, and then wait for the courtiers to throw a copy of wine, qi, wealth, and lust in their face, helpless. In the 15th year of the Wanli reign, the left censorate of the Dali temple, Luo Yuan, was criticized by the Emperor Wanli for having all 5 poisons. Does Emperor Wanli have a solution? No. The consequence of not arguing is to become a marionette, sit on the imperial palace where the divine artifact of the world is located, and become a rubber stamp. The consequence of not arguing is that in the face of the crumbling state of the Ming Dynasty, one becomes helpless and cowardly, hiding in the harem without saying a word. The consequence of not arguing is that even the Ming's dogs dare to show their teeth at him, and his people are easily bullied. He wants to argue. He also wanted to see to some extent whether the iron triangle of Zhang Juzheng, Feng Bao, and Empress Dowager Li dared to take the great injustice of the world and depose himself as the emperor. Zhang Hong, along with his several adopted sons, arrived at the 5 Phoenix Tower of Qingtian Gate and found the Marshal Zhu Shixiao. He clarified the sign and said, "Your Majesty has an order to transfer 50 cavalry to clear the Qianqing Palace." "How dare you?" Zhu Shixiao was taken aback and asked with a dramatically changed expression. He only then realized that the little emperor's apprenticeship was intended to drag him into the water. When Zhu Shixiao realized that he had boarded a pirate ship, it was too late to repent. He thought that His Majesty wanted to practice martial arts simply because of the assassination incident. At this young age, why is there so much thought in his heart? Is this cavalry adjusted or not? Zhang Hong used his injured hand to hold up the emperor's token and sternly said, "How dare you? The imperial power is granted. Tishuai, are you planning to resist the imperial decree? Does Zhu Shixiao dare to resist orders?" Every kind of support from readers is the driving force behind the author's continuous coding. Everyone, don't keep books. Keep them and keep them. Keep them, keep them. Keep them. Keep them, keep them. Keep them. Keep them, keep them. Keep them. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Emperor's Token. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Emperor's Token refusing to comply with orders. Under the system design of the Ming Dynasty's imperial system, the result of disobeying imperial edicts was the abandonment of both humans and gods. The emperor could use non-criminal justice to accuse treason, and no one in the court dared to plead for Zhu Shixiao, the commander-in-chief, for disobeying imperial edicts. And Zhang Hong's token is indeed the token of Emperor Zhu Yijun of the Ming Dynasty. Even if the emperor does not worship Commander D as his teacher, Commander D Zhu Shixiao must mobilize troops. I must go together. Zhu Shixiao decided to transfer troops without considering for more than 5 breaths, but he had to follow. We don't dare to lead the cavalry to do things ourselves. Isn't that a case of seeking death? Xia Tishuai succeeded. Zhang Honggang's still angry face immediately turned into a smile, as if he had never asked before. Even if Zhu Shixiao didn't say he wanted to go with him, Zhang Hong would still request the commander to go with him. The eunuch in charge of the army would have to die in a well the next day, which is a taboo that cannot be touched. How many troubles did eunuchs in the mid to late Tang dynasty cause when they wielded military power? As the grand pendant of the Qianqing palace, Zhang Hong is a very measured person. He must be clear about what can be done and what cannot be done. Eunuchs flip their faces faster than books, and Zhu Shixiao has seen it many times. The speed of Zhang Hong and Feng Bao flipping their faces is on par. What kind of demons are there in this damning palace? Zhang Hong, with his 2 adopted sons and 50 cavalry, began to clean up the Qianqing palace, with waves of ghost crying and wolf howling. After such a big incident occurred, Empress Dowager Li did not fall asleep. She and Empress Chen discussed the matter of stabbing the king and killing the driver. When they heard the wailing of ghosts and wolves outside the palace, Empress Dowager Li asked the palace maid what was going on, but did not give an order to stop it. Bringing Zhang Hong to the Qianqing palace was the order she had just issued, which was to make Zhang Hong completely offend Feng Bao. There was a threat to Feng Bao's status in the palace, and it was a kind of urging. Zhang Hong was originally worried about the Empress Dowager's obstruction. The Empress Dowager was still holding a lamp, but no one came to stop him for a long time. Zhang Hong boldly took care of His Majesty's palace maids and eunuchs, but he cleared out anyone belonging to Feng Bao. This Qing palace, not to mention a sunken well, has all been delivered to the Langxia home. The Empress Dowager's people, Zhang Hong did not move because His Majesty had already delineated the scope of the Qing palace. Empress Dowager Li resided in the Xinang palace and was asked by court officials to take care of the little emperor. The people around Empress Dowager Li were all from the Xinang palace, and Zhang Hong, a eunuch from the Qianqing palace, would not plead with him if he extended his hand. Zhang Hong is a person with a sense of propriety. After all, he is a eunuch of the Langxia family. Although he is also the head of the palace, the number of adopted sons and daughters in this palace is limited. The number of big tails serving the emperor has sharply decreased from nearly 100 to 6. 3 eunuchs and 3 palace maids. Zhang Hong. Feng Bao heard the news and rushed over with a group of followers. He looked at Zhang Hong with a gloomy expression, gritted his teeth, and pointed at him, asking, "How are you doing?" "Ah." With this shout, Feng Bao's injured face made him twitch in pain. Zhu Shixiao's eyebrows were twisted into knots, so there must be no conflict, otherwise it would be very difficult for Zhu Shixiao and his cavalry to handle it. Zhang Hong shook his broad sleeves and revealed the emperor's token, then sternly asked, "How are you doing?" "Your Majesty's token is in front of you. Are you going to disobey the emperor's order? Even if you provoke the Empress Dowager, you won't be able to make sense. If the mission is messed up, it's just messed up. The Empress Dowager and your Majesty are scheming for an old relationship and haven't sunk you in the well. They are still bothering you. Do you really think you have a long life?" Zhang Hong was a bit timid. Feng Bao was deeply rooted and ingrained in the palace, and he was always Feng Bao's person. However, when Zhang Hong faced Feng Bao, he still held on and shouted loudly. Behind him stood the emperor, who had sent him to do this, and the Empress Dowager tacitly agreed. He holds His Majesty's token. He should be right and resolute. However, as Zhang Hong looked at Feng Bao, could the token in his hand really control the ancestors in this palace? Feng Bao furrowed his brows when he saw the token. Of course, he knew the token. It was a complete set of seals and ribbons made by the seal and ribbon supervisor in June last year after the emperor's great tour. Feng Bao personally went to pick it up and presented it to the Empress Dowager, who then handed it over to the emperor as a token. "Farewell to your Majesty." Feng Bao respectfully bowed to the signboard before standing up. With so many people watching, if Feng Bao shows any disrespect and reaches Empress Li's ears, not to mention making a big pendant, even living is a problem. "Okay, that's great." Feng Bao kept clapping his hands as he looked at Zhang Hong. His expression gradually softened and he said with a smile, "We're all doing errands for Grandpa Huang. You must serve His Majesty with all your heart, but if there's any mistake, you'll have to look good." Feng Baolu is scared. Zhang Hongmin keenly sensed Feng Bao's timidity. Firstly, Feng Bao messed up his job. Secondly, Feng Bao was afraid of this piece of credit card. Is this a credit card? This is imperial power. This signboard is thousands of times more useful than Zhang Hong imagined. If it weren't for this token, Feng Bao would have had a conflict with him, and 100 Zhang Hong were not Feng Bao's opponents. Zhang Hong raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Whatever our ancestors say is just begging for food. If we make a mistake, I will find a well to jump into and avoid obstructing the eyes of the Emperor and Empress Dowager Tianwei." This remark made a mockery of Feng Bao, allowing criminals to enter the palace and even break into the presence of His Majesty. This is a heinous crime. Today is the arrival of the heavens, but Feng Bao still made a mistake. If Feng Bao is right, the mouth on his face was pulled by others. Did someone else hit him with that bump on his head? Feng Bao choked on these words and couldn't say a word. Zhang Hong rubbed his nose and face, naturally hating him, but his heart was even more disgusted by that dog that eats inside out. Blame your Majesty for not forgiving. The strange Empress Dowager doesn't remember old relationships. Blame Zhang Hongya for his sharp teeth and sharp mouth. Blame him for Feng Bao's incompetence in handling things. Only those who commit thieves for 1,000 days, how can there be those who guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Your Majesty's insignia is here, and the imperial power is above. Feng Bao is at fault, so he can only let people attack him and cannot speak up. The Qianqing Palace sent out more than 20 eunuchs and 30 palace maids. Feng Bao came to the front of the Qianqing Palace and brought more than 10 servants. Although they all silently watched the two big pendants arguing, their inner thoughts were too small for outsiders. Ancestor, the Empress Dowager sent you to catch the inner ghost. How are you doing now? Hurry up tomorrow. If your Majesty asks, I have something to say, right? Zhang Hong, who gained the power, asked about Feng Bao's job instead. Who exactly is the ancestor in the palace? Whoever is close to His Majesty or the Empress Dowager is our ancestor. Got it, it's Chen Hong and his sons and grandsons. Feng Bao replied unhappily, shaking his sleeves and not wanting to say much. Now that Zhang Hong has gained momentum, staying any longer is just a shame. Farewell to our ancestors. Zhang Hong accepted as soon as he saw the situation, without further questioning. His Majesty's order was to clear the palace, and he had already stepped on Feng Bao under the guise of tiger power, which was enough. This is also taking advantage of Feng Bao's mistake to step on him like this. If Feng Bao didn't make a mistake and gave Zhang Hong 100 courage, he wouldn't dare. Spring day brings shade and darkness, with thin and deeper clouds. This spring morning is mostly gloomy, with thin and far-reaching clouds. Zhu Yijun yawned and got up from bed in the 5th shift. Zhang Hong had already finished his errand and returned to the outside of the Qianqing Palace. Upon hearing the commotion in the room, Zhang Hong walked into the Qianqing Palace, opened the door, and gestured for 2 palace maids waiting at the door to go in and take care of His Majesty's changing clothes and washing. I'll do it myself. Zhu Yijun sat still and asked the palace maid not to approach, but to change her Yan Bian crown dress. Yan Bian Guan Fu, this is Emperor Jiajing, the grandfather of Emperor Wanli. In the struggle of the Great Rites Conference, he created the emperor's regular uniform, which is the same as the 4 sets of regular uniform that Emperor Jiajing talked about. Decorated with colorful jade clouds in front of the crown, symbolizing the 5 elements, and 4 mountains behind the crown, symbolizing the 4 directions. The body of the garment is black, with blue edges on the collar, sleeves, collar, and other areas. The front chest is painted with a coiled dragon round patch, and the back is embroidered with double dragon square patches. The front is 1 and the back is 2, symbolizing 3 talents. The cost of this garment is not cheap at all, just the 3 dragon gold threads and embroidery techniques, which are things that money cannot buy. Wearing the clothes is not troublesome. Zhu Yijun has hands and feet, and doesn't want people to be too close to him. The coronal robe is too cumbersome for him to wear on his own, and he needs to be attended to by the palace people. Zhang Hong knelt respectfully on the ground and saw that His Majesty had changed his clothes and finished washing. He raised the token in his hand above his head and loudly said, "I have finished my task. I kindly request your majesty to retrieve the token." Zhu Yijun walked up to Zhang Hong, picked up the signboard and hung it around his waist before asking, "Get up and talk. You don't have to kneel all the time when you have something to say in the future. Did Feng Bao ever trouble you?" Zhang Hong stood up and bowed his head, saying, "Feng Daying knows about the Qin Palace and has visited it once, but he didn't say anything. He just reminded me to serve His Majesty well and not be lazy." "Oh, I didn't say anything," Zhu Yijun continued. "How did you catch this insider?" Zhang Hong pondered for a moment and bowed his head, saying, "Feng Daying has arrested Chen Hong. He said it was Chen Hong and his remaining villains who did it." Chen Hong, a former eunuch in charge of the Imperial household department, was always cunning, and ruthless. She liked to take some medicine from tigers and wolves. Empress Dowager was extremely dissatisfied with Chen Hong. After Emperor Longqing's grand performance, she immediately dismissed all her positions and sent her to live in the Langxia family. Zhang Hong pretended to kneel again, but just as His Majesty said he wouldn't kneel, he tentatively said, "I am guilty. Your Majesty, although I am the Lord, I only have 3 adopted sons and 3 adopted daughters. I can only dispatch so many people to serve." Zhu Yijun didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "It's better to be less in charge. Let's count you as the only 7 people serving in front of the emperor. If there's less, make up for it. If there's more, it'll be troublesome." The more bloated the organizational structure is, the more rigid it becomes, with a plethora of personnel involved in various intrigues. 7 people are really not lacking. Within 3 zhang, the more people there are, the more troublesome it becomes, while the fewer people there are, the cleaner and safer it is. 3 zhang away. 3 zhang away, the imperial power is invincible. After having breakfast, Empress Dowager once again instructed about the feast. According to the ancestral system of the Ming Dynasty, she was not allowed to engage in politics in the imperial palace. She couldn't even go to the Wenhua Hall and listen to politics from the curtains. Not to mention being appointed as a court official. Every time the little emperor went to the Wenhua Hall for a banquet, Empress Dowager was particularly worried. It is said to be a feast, but in fact, there are discussions from the Chang dynasty. The Wenhua Hall was the place where the Ming court deliberated, with the participation of 27 civil and military court officials. This was also known as the 9 Ministers' Round Review, which decided many government affairs of the Ming dynasty. The Huangji Hall was the place where the Ming court deliberated, mainly responsible for reading out court decisions. The young emperor was young, and Empress Dowager was worried that Zhu Yijun would be bullied at the Wenhua Hall. Feng Daban's face was injured. "Today's banquet, let Zhang Hong go with the emperor." Empress Dowager carefully checked the attire of the little emperor again, and only then announced a decision. Zhu Yijun smiled and said, "Zhang Hong can't do it. Let Feng Daban follow, otherwise the foreign ministers will have to guess, and it will be very troublesome. Major personnel adjustments should not be so abrupt, otherwise it will cause a lot of trouble." The news of the assassination of the king in the Daming Palace, which was like a sieve, had already spread outside. If Feng Bao did not go to the Wenhua Hall, even if Zhang Juzheng was pressing down, the foreign ministers would have to stir up trouble again. It is difficult to say that Zhang Juzheng can firmly grasp the foreign court without Feng Bao's help. The iron triangle of Zhang Juzheng, Feng Bao, and Empress Dowager is interdependent. Without any link, the fragile situation of the Ming dynasty will once again become eerie. Bull ghosts and snake gods dance in chaos. But Zhu Yijun knew very well that the power in his hands was really too little. Feng Bao, or eunuchs, is the dog that the emperor keeps and bites at the external court. The injury on Feng Bao's face is not a big problem. In the assassination case, as long as Feng Bao still appears in the Wenhua Hall, the ministers of the external court can only continue to shrink their heads. That's okay, Empress Dowager Li was actually very hesitant. Will Feng Bao go to the Wenhua Hall or not? If the foreign ministers didn't go, they would make a fuss again. However, Empress Dowager Li was a bit worried about whether Feng Bao had teamed up with Zhang Juzheng to deal with the little emperor, worrying about gains and losses. The more she thought about it, the more entangled she became, making it difficult for her to fall asleep. She stayed up all night thinking about who the culprit was, but she couldn't even go to the Wenhua Hall and could only rely on Feng Bao for everything. As a result, Feng Bao was also somewhat unreliable, causing her great confusion. Before she could even reach her 30s, 27-year-old Empress Dowager Li didn't actually have many ideas. Since her son said she wanted Feng Bao to follow, let Feng Bao follow. When they arrived at the Wenhua Hall, the ministers surrounded them. The emperor felt that Feng Bao would not be bullied, so he let Feng Bao continue to follow. Zhu Yijun did not take a sedan chair to drive away, but walked towards the Wenhua Hall. Feng Bao followed suit behind him, each step at the same distance, just one seat away from His Majesty. Zhu Yijun suddenly stood still and spoke, Feng Daban, you stepped on my authority before. I know that I didn't want to pay attention to you, so I stepped on you. There are so many people in the palace, and I have just ascended the throne. You always need some authority to do things. You put the villain into the palace to harm me once you have established your authority. Is that how you did your ancestors? Damn it. Feng Bao, holding the treasure of Wanli, immediately knelt to the ground upon hearing your Majesty's inquiry and held it up, his hands trembling. Zhu Yijun turned around and calmly said, look straight at me. Yes. Feng Bao looked up and looked at the Emperor Ming, who was slightly chubby and taller than the sky, through the seal of the treasure of Wanli. With just one sentence, Feng Bao, the old ancestor, immediately had to sink into the Jinshui River. The power of eunuchs comes entirely from imperial power, and the person in front of them is the emperor. The treasure of the Wanli era in front of them does not belong to the Empress Dowager, Zhang Juzheng, or Feng Bao, but to the person in front of them. Zhu Yijun stared at Feng Bao calmly and said, your mother is a woman's family. Don't coax her in the future. Now that Chen Hong has fallen and Gao Gong has also fallen, what is inside and outside is what is inside and outside. Don't add insult to injury and make your mother overly worried. Get up now. Zhu Yijun did not ask Feng Bao to do more difficult things. He didn't like Feng Bao deceiving Empress Dowager Li. Empress Dowager Li is just a woman's family, with great worries about gains and losses. The Ming Dynasty was in turmoil and on the brink of danger. Emperor Longqing left early again, and Feng Bao kept talking nonsense, causing Empress Dowager Li to constantly wake up in the middle of the night. Feng Bao kowtowed respectfully and said solemnly, thank you for your kindness, your Majesty. At this time, the Iron Triangle political alliance of Feng Bao, Zhang Juzheng, and Empress Dowager Li was the biggest obstacle to Zhu Yijun's personal rule, and it was also his greatest protective umbrella at a young age. Feng Bao still needs to use it, but it's not like before, everything depends on it. Let's go to Changchao. Zhu Yijun strode forward and headed towards the Wenhua Hall. Ascend. Feng Baoji took a few steps and arrived at the Wenhua Hall, shouting loudly. He placed the treasure of Wanli on the imperial table of the platform of Emperor Dan. The four little yellow gates carried the dragon chairs and placed them behind the imperial court. Every day after the morning court, the dragon chairs were lifted down. Xianwen and Wading courtiers enter the hall. Feng Bao shook the dust again, and Tishuai stood in front of the door, swinging his whip 3 times and shouting loudly, enter the hall. The general of the Great Han in front of the door searched the civil and military ministers for any weapons. The courtiers rushed in, and when they arrived, Zhang Juzheng led 27 courtiers to bow and kowtow 3 times. Long live my emperor, long live, long live. Zhu Yijun raised his hand slightly and said, flat. Zhu Yijun looked at the leader in the center, who was the head of the cabinet, the grand secretary of the Zhongji Hall, and Zhang Juzheng. The 4,600-word chapter has a high level of completeness, and the reading experience is poor when opened. Please provide all support. Follow-up reading is the best companion, and the support of readers is the greatest motivation for the author to move forward. Ahem. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. 1,000 Readers and 1,000 Confucius. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 7. The First Auxiliary High Arch Instructs Assassination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The First Auxiliary High Arch Instructs Assassination. The Marshal Zhu Yijun, who was responsible for overseeing the assassination of the king, spoke up and said, "The villain's name is Minister Wang, and his surname is Zhang Long. He is from Wujin County, Changzhou, southern Jili, and claims to be a Zhejiang army under Qi Jiguang." After investigation, he was found to be a servant in the capital. His real name was Wang Zhonglong. Yesterday, at 3/4 midnight, he pretended to be an internal attendant with a vegetable household waste tag and entered the imperial city through Xuanwu Gate. After hearing this, Zhang Juzheng spoke up and asked, where did this person come from for his attendant uniform and waist badge? Confessing to provide for Chen Hong, Zhu Yijun said and looked at Feng Bao, the head of the East Factory. He couldn't manage the affairs in the palace. Zhu Yijun sat on the platform, flipping through the 4 books of Jijia. When he heard Zhu Yijun speak, he realized a problem. The reason why Minister Wang was able to enter the palace was entirely due to the interior clothing and the waistband of the vegetable household camp. This minister has gained status. In fact, it is not uncommon for outsiders to infiltrate this palace. This is the way eunuchs earn money. Some people are curious about what the imperial palace in the capital looks like and are willing to pay to come in and see it. It's ridiculous to say that in the heavily guarded Ming Dynasty, outsiders could take some money and come into this heavily guarded palace. Who received this money? Naturally, the eunuchs took it away. The affairs of eunuchs are beyond the control of the eunuchs. Cutting off one's financial path is like killing one's parents. The eunuchs must investigate thoroughly, and they may not know how to deal with the eunuchs. Even the courtiers took it for granted, but no one blamed it. It was the poor supervision of Marshal Zhu Yijun that led to the thieves entering the palace, as everyone had become accustomed to it. Who hasn't mixed sand into the palace yet? The Tianwei and the East Factory were supposed to be 2 opposing forces of secret agents, but due to the dominance of the East Factory, their ability to balance was constantly weakened, and the power of the Tianwei was too low and had become a vassal of the East Factory. Zhu Yijun's little butterfly flapped its wings and had already shown its effect. Originally, Minister Wang's case was to be handed over to the East Factory for interrogation, but due to Zhu Yijun's remarks, Empress Dowager handed the case over to the cavalry for interrogation. According to the regulations, the East Factory must open the palace gate at dawn before they can leave the palace to handle cases. Therefore, the true identity of the royal minister cannot be determined during this morning's banquet. At the gate of Qingtian, there is the North Town Governor's office on the tiki. By sending a message and punishing a few thousand households, it is possible to thoroughly investigate the ancestors of Minister Wang for 18 generations. At least it has been confirmed that this Liao is not under the command of the Qi family army, but rather a servant in the capital. The identity of an assassin is really important. Cavalry is just a lack of power, it's not that it can't be done well or accomplished. Feng Bao's forehead was wrapped in gauze, and his 2 swollen cheeks were high. He sat in the position of the eunuch in charge of the imperial examination, and spoke with a raised voice, saying, "Our family and Chen Hong have a life and death grudge. Yesterday, Chen Hong was arrested, and Chen Hong has admitted that he provided interior clothing and a vegetable household waste tag. Ting Xian, Meng Chong, and others left the imperial city and conspired with evil people, which allowed this royal minister to infiltrate the palace and cause this evil thing to happen. Fortunately, your majesty is unharmed. Your Majesty, is it okay? Yang Bo, the Minister of Personnel, shook his sleeve and stared at Feng Bao, asking, the villain has been stabbed empty. If he hasn't been stabbed empty, what should he do? Your Majesty is still young, how can you make a judgment when he is frightened? As the Minister of Internal Affairs, you are responsible for everything in the palace. If you let the villain into the palace, why are you still sitting here? Yang Bo, who passed the imperial examination in the 8th year of the Jiajing reign, initially served as a local official. In the 18th year of the Jiajing reign, he accompanied the Grand Secretary Zhai Luan on a patrol of the 9 border areas. In the 19th year of the Jiajing reign, Emperor Jiajing summoned Yang Bo to the palace at night to report on the situation, which was highly appreciated by the Jiajing reign. Starting from the 25th year of the Jiajing reign, he began to patrol the border areas. In the 33rd year of the Jiajing reign, the Tatars captured Duer Khan and his grandson, leading over 100,000 cavalry to plunder Jijun. Yang Bo and the commander Chief Zhou Yichang fought bravely, without disarming their armor and taking control of the enemy. At night, they recruited brave warriors, went deep into the enemy camp, and repelled the enemy. In the 34th year of the Jiajing reign, Yang Bo once again repelled the invading Duer Khan. Yang Bo patrolled the border until the 42nd year of the Jiajing reign. Due to the defeat of the Jiliao governor Yang Xian, he returned to the court and served as the Minister of Personnel. Yang Bo, as the Crown Prince's young master, was a high-ranking official with experience in performing local duties and military achievements. He was not afraid of the eunuch Feng Bao because he was the current leader of the Jin Party. The Jin Party is a deep-rooted ally that occupies the court. Another unbreakable political alliance. Left Imperial censor Gusholi immediately agreed and said, Feng Bao, you hold the heavy handle in the palace, and your Majesty the Empress Dowager has entrusted you with important tasks. Is that how you act like a grand pendant? Apart from being arrogant and seeking unlimited blessings, besides being greedy for silver, what else can you do? The Emperor's thoughts are on the verge of chaos. Zhu Yijun flipped through the analects in his hand, occasionally picking up his pen and taking notes. He studied very seriously, and the noise in the audience didn't seem to affect him. Although Jiajing did not go to court, it did not mean that he did not participate in court discussions. The old Taoist always hid behind the heavy screen of the luo, striking the copper bell with a copper hammer, how many times, the importance, and urgency of the sound. It was entirely up to the courtiers to guess what he was expressing. Jiajing practiced immortality in the Wenhua Hall, while the little emperor studied in the Wenhua Hall. The little emperor was studying, and the courtiers were making a fuss under the platform. The art style was both eerie and eerie, but it was the result of multiple struggles. In June of the 6th year of the Longqing reign, within less than a month of Emperor Longqing's grand procession, Gao Gong, as a Yuan Fu, submitted a memorial to the Daoist court. This memorial was lengthy, but there was a sentence inside that read, if there are any documents that have not been drafted yet, they must be approved internally. Only after Rong Chen and others understand the memorial can they be implemented. The meaning of this sentence is, if there is a memorial that has not been drafted by the cabinet and is directly approved by the emperor, the court officials need to present it to the emperor in person and inquire clearly before it can be implemented. Gao Gong not only said that a 10-year-old man cannot rule the world, but also put forward specific restrictions that the emperor cannot bypass the Wenyuan pavilion and criticize without authorization. The emperor approved it internally without prior approval. This sentence truly touched Empress Dowager Li's taboo. Can the emperor use the word direct self when reviewing memorials? So, in order to allow the emperor to take control, the little emperor who was supposed to study in the back of the Wenhua Hall was carried to the front hall and sat on the platform, reading while listening to the courtiers arguing. These 20.7 court officials soon became accustomed to this type of court discussion. Feng Bao was not at all timid at this moment, sneered and looked at Yang Bo, saying, Our family is sitting here, and it is only the trust of the Empress Dowager and His Majesty that made us come and monitor you. It's not your turn to interrupt the palace affairs. You need to manage things outside the palace. You also need to manage things inside the palace. Does your Majesty have to take care of what he eats? This morning, while waiting outside the Qianqing Palace, the little yellow gate next to the Empress Dowager sent a message to Feng Bao. The Empress Dowager's intention was to prevent Feng Bao from attending the scripture banquet, and in the end, it was the Emperor's decision to let him follow. Even though Feng Bao was wearing gauze on his head, His Majesty made him get up. Your Majesty's words also made Feng Baoxin feel uneasy. It turned out that all his tricks were in your Majesty's eyes. Your Majesty was not unaware, but was too lazy to care about them. He even intended to make him stand up and oversee everything in the palace. However, the mission was ruined, and he slapped his face and kowtowed his head. His power was also compromised, and your Majesty allowed him to rise up. That means His Majesty still trusts him, allows him to do things, and he is still useful. He naturally has full confidence, and behind him is the Emperor. In this Wenhua Palace court discussion, he represents the power of the Emperor in the conflict with civil officials. Chen Hong's confession was instructed by Gao Gong, the former head of the cabinet, to take action. Feng Bao threw out a sentence that was neither light nor heavy. This statement had a strong attacking force, and the courtiers immediately fell silent. The Wenhua Hall was extremely quiet, except for the sound of the little emperor flipping through books on the platform and the large yellow silk screen being blown by the wind. Feng Bao's biting in this Wenhua Hall is extremely qualified. Although he was injured, his attack power is still incredibly strong. In a few words, it blocked the courtiers from speaking and even stabbed the hearts of the civil servants. Gao Gong, the former prime minister of the cabinet, promoted many Jin parties during his reign. If Gao Gong were convicted of plotting rebellion by assassinating the king, those Jin parties promoted by Gao Gong would be unlucky. Everyone turned their attention to Zhang Juzheng, the first cabinet minister on the left. Before Emperor Longqing's grand visit, he appointed 3 major ministers to assist the country. Gao Yi died, Gao Gong collapsed, and now only Zhang Juzheng is left. Zhang Juzheng's attitude is very important. At this time, the first assistant was flipping through the case files, examining the documentary evidence, physical evidence, and personal evidence provided by the North Town Governor's office. This case was handled by Tiki with great speed. Qi Jiguang is a person of Zhang Juzheng, and the two of them have a close relationship. If this villain, Wang Zhonglong, really comes from the Qi family army, Qi Jiguang cannot avoid trouble, even Zhang Juzheng will be implicated. But Tishuai Zhu Shixiao found the evidence thoroughly. This servant had lived in the capital for more than 10 years, and the trajectory of his life was extremely clear. The royal guards had already declined, so he finally found a job and naturally couldn't do it. Qi Jiajun and Qi Jiguang have cleared the suspicion, and Zhang Juzheng can stand aside and handle this case. How important is it for the first assistant to be detached from the situation? This provides more room for advancement and retreat. At the beginning of the battle, Zhang Juzheng did not believe in assassins from the Qi family army. He could not even kill a 10-year-old child or deal with a eunuch named Zhang Hong. The Qi family army consisted of less than 6,000 people, and everyone was extremely brave. As for the documentary evidence, physical evidence, and personal evidence brought by the East Factory, Zhang Juzheng simply flipped through them and closed them without looking further. At this point, Zhang Juzheng actually understood the overall context of the case. During the reign of Emperor Longqing, Chen Hong was the ancestral ancestor of the palace, the eunuch in charge of the imperial seal, the supervisor of the East Factory, and the eunuch in charge of the imperial horse. He was known for his immense power and rampant behavior. With Emperor Longqing's reign, Chen Hong immediately lost all his power, and Chen Hong and Gao Gong had a great personal relationship. When Chen Hong fell, Gao Gong also fell. There is no better way to be a prince than a minister. The villain Wang Zhonglong was indeed found by Chen Hong. Chen Hong wanted to take this opportunity to make a comeback and have the angry Empress Dowager directly kill Feng Bao, the first person responsible, so that Chen Hong could restore his immense power. But Chen Hong clearly underestimated Feng Bao's level of trust. Although Chen Hong's strategy succeeded and Feng Bao also paid a painful price, Feng Bao did not die, so the only ones who died were Chen Hong and his followers. The current problem is that the eunuch Feng Bao, who is in charge of printing, is splashing dirty water on Gao Gong. There is evidence in history. Zhang Juzheng closed the case file and said, "Let the three legal departments jointly review the case of Wang Zhonglong." Zhang Juzheng wrote his opinion on the case file, took out the seal, sewed it together, and entrusted it to Zhang Hong. Zhang Hong, the eunuch of Qianqing Palace, held the case file and placed it in front of His Majesty the Emperor, waiting for him to use the treasure of Wanli. Zhu Yijun looked at the treasure of Wanli, which was his jade seal. Empress Dowager Li, Feng Bao, and Zhang Juzheng couldn't touch it either. It was indeed Zhang Juzheng who was in charge of the external court affairs, but if Zhu Yijun didn't use a seal, he wouldn't be able to handle it. 13 years after the Wanli reign, Emperor Wanli began to neglect his duties, leaving most of the court officials without the need for a seal, and the courtiers had no choice but to do so. This is the institutional design of the Ming Dynasty's imperial system. Without imperial power, everything would rest and the Ming Dynasty could not do anything. It is a fallacy for Zhu Yijun to look at the unbreakable political alliance between Zhang Juzheng and Feng Bao. Whether there is a problem with Gao Gong or not, Zhang Juzheng's attitude towards this matter is only based on historical evidence. If there is a problem with Gao Gong, we will handle it. If there is no problem with Gao Gong after the joint review of the three legal departments, we will not handle it. Zhang Juzheng and Gao Gong only have different political views. He only gave up Gao Gong in order to fulfill his own aspirations, and it was not a matter of life or death. Feng Bao's face changed, but he didn't say much. Zhang Juzheng's attitude was very neutral, and he didn't speak on Feng Bao's side this time. Instead, the three legal departments held a joint review of the Wang Zhonglong assassination case. The three law departments are composed of the Imperial Censorate, the Dali Temple, and the Ministry of Justice, with the Tianwei and the East Factory working together, and the three law departments leading the way. If this case is handed over to the external court, Gao Gong will not die. Zhu Yijun picked up a red pen and criticized it, then covered it with the treasure of Wanli, and began the next process of interrogation in the assassination of the king. Zhang Juzheng continued to preside over the court discussions, which involved various aspects of the Ming Dynasty, including the finance and taxation of the Ministry of Revenue, the border areas of the Ministry of War, the important cases of criminal names and punishments of the Ministry of Justice, the promotion of education by the Ministry of Rights, the creation of the Ministry of Works, and the examination of the Ministry of Personnel. The exam method is performance evaluation. Those who are capable are superior, while those who are mediocre are inferior. The system design has already formed its embryonic form, but it is still under discussion. If we give the officials a headshot, they will naturally not be willing. Everyone has been discussing seniority for a long time, how can we be willing to take the internal exam? But if Zhang Juzheng insists on promoting it, then the system can only be improved. Zhu Yijun had been reading books all along, and the court officials made a resolution and handed it to Zhang Hong for use in front of the imperial case. After Zhu Yijun finished reading it, he would use the seal, but he did not express his opinion. The court officials were discussing matters, the young emperor was studying, and by the time the sun was rising, Zhu Yijun had already been able to silently read a few paragraphs of this Analects, knowing both its nature and its reasons. Your Majesty, the court discussion has come to an end. Zhang Hong reminded His Majesty that the discussion had ended. 27 court officials stood up to pay their respects and left the Wenhua Hall. Zhang Juzheng stood below the stage, holding his hand and bowing his head, saying, Your Majesty, I will answer your questions. Can Yuan Fu teach without reading a book? Zhu Yijun stopped writing and asked Zhang Juzheng, who was empty-handed. Zhang Juzheng respectfully replied, I am a scholar. Why does the Analects of Confucius read Yang Ping Sheng instead of Chu Sheng? Zhu Yijun raised his own doubts. Be sure to pay attention to following and reading, please follow and read, ahem. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The military appearance of the Ming Dynasty. Yao Tianwei. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The military appearance of the Ming Dynasty. Yao Tianwei the Analects, reading 2 tones but not 4 tones, this is Zhu Yijun's problem. Zhang Juzheng immediately replied, according to the Book of Han, each disciple has his own record. After the master passed away, his disciples collaborated and compiled the Analects, hence it is called the Analects. The meaning of discussing, and compiling, is not the meaning of discussing, so it is read as Yang Ping Sheng, Lun, instead of Chu Sheng, Lun. So, Zhu Yijun finally understood why the Analects were composed of 2 tones, not 4 tones, and were a compilation rather than discussion. As Zhang Juzheng said, he is a scholar. As the 9th-ranked scholar in the 2nd class, he has no problems with his knowledge and plans. He answers the questions of the little emperor with ease. Zhu Yijun began to ask questions about some doubts in the Analects. Zhang Juzheng answered fluently and explained in great detail. Between questions and answers, time flew by quickly, and an hour had already passed before he knew it. It wasn't until Zhang Hong reminded His Majesty that it was time for lunch that he finally stopped. Zhang Juzheng was quite pleased. He became more and more satisfied as he looked at the little emperor. Today, the little emperor read on his own and achieved more results than the previous 6 menstrual feasts. His Majesty read the book very seriously and had his own insights. For example, it's not surprising that some friends come from afar. Your Majesty's explanation. Friends who come from afar naturally have common topics and aspirations, and they will naturally do the same things. How can they not be happy? The predicate is comrades and colleagues, only then can we enjoy together. This explanation left Zhang Juzheng deeply moved. He had filled it in like a duck in the previous 6 months, how to fill it in and how to come out. He read the book, but only read a little bit. And now Zhang Juzheng finally feels that all his hard work has not been in vain. Zhang Juzheng shook his sleeve with great solemnity, bowed 5 times and knelt 3 times on the ground, sincerely saying, I have violated the law. I abide by the founding constitution of my ancestors, dare not speculate and love talents for the country. I dare not use them for personal gain. Therefore, I repay the late emperor and remain loyal to his official duties. Your Majesty is wise, and I still hope that you will continue to give lectures, be diligent in governing, be virtuous and far from treacherous, so that the palace and government can be unified, and the whole world can be united, in order to achieve the long-standing governance of Yongxi. Zhang Juzheng's statement of usurpation loses the duty of a vassal. Who can have expectations of the emperor? But considering that the emperor was only 10 years old and the emperor was not strong enough, this statement was an affirmation of the emperor by Zhang Juzheng as the first assistant. Zhu Yijun smiled and replied, Ai Qing is flat. Yuan Fu, can I inquire about Wang Zhonglong's case? Zhu Yijun didn't get up and looked at Zhang Juzheng, asking. If given some sunshine, it will shine brightly. If given some dye, it will open a dyeing workshop. He immediately chose to kick his nose and face, continuing to explore the boundaries of his imperial power. What happened to the 10-year-old emperor? The lack of imperial power does not mean that Zhu Yijun is not the emperor. At the age of 10, the emperor cannot interfere with the affairs of the court. He is the mastermind, it was him who was assassinated. Zhang Juzheng could only have one answer to Zhu Yijun's question. He bent down and said, there is nothing but reason. Feng Daban, you have been in power for more than half a year now. Chen Hong has a life and death grudge against you, and he harbors resentment towards the Empress Dowager for taking his position and power. Why didn't you sink him early? If this happens soon, there will still be this case today. Zhu Yijun first looked at Feng Bao. Feng Bao was a bit confused when asked, and his words had been in his mind several times before he knelt down with a thud and said in terror, I thought sending Chen Hong's dog to the corridor house was enough. I didn't expect him to be so disloyal and unfilial, eating inside and outside. I ask your majesty to be aware that I am guilty. Zhu Yijun shook his head and looked at Feng Bao, saying, Feng Daban, you still don't know where you're wrong. I'm here to ask you, if you're Chen Hong, if Chen Hong is you, you can exchange them. You two have a life and death feud. Chen Hong gained power 6 months ago, where are you today? The years in the well are withered. Feng Bao knelt on the ground, a layer of cold sweat rising behind him. Thinking from a different perspective, with Chen Hong's ruthlessness, Feng Bao had only one fate and had long been thrown into the well. Zhu Yijun continued, today's fruit was yesterday's cause. The injury on your face today is the cause you planted yesterday. Since you are in power, you will not spare anyone. Only by thinking of your kindness can you brew today's events. Yuan Fu just said, the palace and mansion are one. As the grand pendant in the palace, the eunuch in charge of the seal and the head of the East factory, with your power, can you really make the palace and mansion one? After the assassination of the king, how will the Empress Dowager consider you? If you don't know, you can't manage the palace maids and eunuchs in the palace. I will teach you. You hang small boxes everywhere in the palace. If you have any disobedient words or deeds, or even murderous acts, you can put them into the boxes to report them. The father can tell the son can tell the father, and the son can tell the owner. So people are afraid to hide behind the forest. Your position as an old ancestor is naturally as stable as Mount Tai. Who can bear you? Taking the Chen Hong case as an example, if Chen Hong wants to plot for your position, he cannot do it himself, so he will have to hand over the matter to his fellow party members such as Ting Xiang and Meng Chong. Do you think these two people should handle the matter or report it? Everyone in this palace wants to climb up, step by step everyone reaches the highest position, reaching your position as Feng Daban. Those who do bad things should be on guard against their accomplices the most. Zhang Hong, the newly appointed eunuch of the Qianqing Palace, heard his legs and stomach spinning beside him. Your Majesty's strategy is really too cunning. Assassinating the king and driving, such a heinous crime. If it were successful, Chen Hong would benefit the most. After Chen Hong benefited, he would definitely kill Ting Xiang and Meng Chong to keep the secret from being exposed. Ting Xiang and Meng Chong have been in the palace for many years, can they not know their strength? If they could quietly report and expose, they would definitely choose this way. Obey your Majesty's teachings. At this moment, Feng Bao had only one feeling, that the old ancestors in the palace should let your Majesty come down to do it. This is completely a plan to cut off one's own virtue. Stay flat, be more clever in the future, don't be so foolish, being pulled by the courtiers of the external court. Zhu Yijun didn't say much to Feng Bao. If Feng Bao didn't do a good job, it would be a dry bone in the well. He couldn't handle such a small matter well and had to be taught by the emperor himself. It can only be said that Feng Bao was still a bit foolish. Feng Bao wants to cry without tears, is he stupid? Is he still stupid? If he were stupid, would there still be a clever person among the eunuchs in the palace? But your Majesty's method is simple, direct, and effective. Zhang Juzheng furrowed his brows as he looked at the little emperor with a new look. Is this little emperor so vicious? But when I think of the dark currents surging inside and outside the Ming Dynasty, ruthlessly targeting the emperor doesn't seem like a flaw. With the decline of the Ming Dynasty, it's better to be more ruthless and avoid being bullied. Zhang Juzheng didn't think it was the idea of the little emperor either. His sunny and cheerful smile and slightly plump face didn't look sinister at all. Zhang Juzheng thought it was Feng Baojiao, the little emperor, who said so. Feng Bao also needs to give an explanation to the foreign court. If there is a disaster, the remedial measures must be told to the foreign court to reassure the ministers. Yuan Fu. Zhu Yijun looked at Zhang Juzheng and spoke again. Today's court discussion, I have listened to some of it intermittently. I will share my views, right? Please ask Yuan Fu to assist me. Yang Bo, the Minister of Personnel, and Gu Sholi, the left censor, seem to be speaking for me, but I have been thinking about it for a long time. It's not like he is loyal and steadfast, thinking for me. He's just using my name to criticize Feng Bao. Their purpose is actually to protect Gao Gong. If Feng Bao hadn't been clever enough to block his words, this case would still have caused waves. Feng Bao heard it from the side and immediately exclaimed loudly, "Ah, yes, yes, your majesty is wise." Then Yang Bo and Gu Sholi are just eyeing Gao Gong and putting their words first. Your majesty, it is indeed so. Zhang Juzheng pondered for a moment and chose to speak the truth. Yang Junqing, the son of Yang Bo, the Minister of Personnel, married the daughter of Wang Chonggu, the Governor-General of Jinying. Gao Gong and Wang Chonggu were close classmates. The Jin Party, with its classmates, teachers, hometown, and relatives by marriage, is deeply rooted in the court. Wang Chonggu led the Beijing camp, and even the elderly, weak, sick, and disabled who had decayed to 50 or 60,000 yuan were still the Beijing camp. Shofu Gao Gong relied on the Jin Party to do things. Yang Bo, the Minister of Personnel, was the Jin Party, Wang Chonggu, the Governor-General of Jinying, or the Jin Party, and Gu Sholi, the Chief Censor of the Imperial Censorate, was the Jin Party. Shofu Gao Gong said in front of the coffin, at the age of 10, how can the Crown Prince govern the world? Upon hearing this, Empress Dowager would think that Gao Gong was for the benefit of the Ming Dynasty. Or do you think that Gao Gong was silenced due to the grief and anger of the late emperor? Or do you think that Gao Gong is monopolizing the state's power and usurping divine weapons? Even if Gao Gong is really for the benefit of the Ming Dynasty, can we say such a thing? If you are not confidential, you will lose your courtiers. If you are not confidential, you will lose your virginity. If you are not confidential, you will become harmed. If even Zhu Yijun knows this, Gao Gong, a cabinet leader, and a scholar, don't you know this? In addition, the emperor criticized Empress Dowager without prior approval, which completely angered her. Gao Gong has lost his heart of obedience. Carrying the banner of loyalty to the emperor and committing acts of disloyalty and unfilial piety has never been uncommon since ancient times. So Zhu Yijun tidied up his desk, especially his notes, which were completely tucked into his sleeve, before he spoke up. Assassinating the king and killing him is a heinous crime of plotting rebellion, not the right punishment. As a monarch, I naturally have the right to inquire. After today's martial arts training is over, I will go to the North Town Governor's office for supervision. What does Yuan Fu think? Zhang Juzheng immediately retorted, Your Majesty, noble people do not walk on lowly land. What is it that the emperor ran to the North Town Governor's office to supervise the trial? At the age of 10, one should focus solely on learning. Even practicing martial arts is an act of neglecting one's profession and skills. It is not appropriate to go to the supervision and review process at this age, and it does not appear to be even more neglectful of one's profession. Feng Bao also lowered his head and said, Your Majesty, how can I explain to the Empress Dowager if you go to the smelly place of the Northern Governor's office and fall ill? Beijing Fusher is an official office, why do we say it's lowly? Zhu Yijun looked at Zhang Juzheng, then at Feng Bao, and asked with a furrowed brow, Yuan Fu and Daban, they don't allow me to supervise the case. Is it because there is another hidden truth in this case? What kind of hidden situation? Chen Hong and Gao Gong are dissatisfied with losing power and take risks, which is a situation. Zhang Juzheng and Feng Bao joined forces to pursue and kill the Gao Gong and Jin factions, which is another situation. The current court discussion is that Chen Hong committed the crime, and Gao Gong is suspected. It is not yet confirmed. If Zhang Juzheng and Feng Bao try to stop him again, it will really be yellow mud covering the crotch of the pants. It's not just feces but also feces. Zhang Juzheng discovered that the little emperor was so eloquent. With just a few words, he blocked him into a corner of the wall. One of them didn't answer well, so Feng Bao sent the words to Empress Dowager Li. How could he make it clear? Zhang Juzheng recalled the lazy and scattered appearance of the little emperor during the previous feast. Now, after reading for a few hours, he can read very clearly. Could it be that this little emperor has been slacking off all along before? Even if it was taught by Feng Baojiao, it was already very difficult to speak so clearly. The little emperor is not stupid, even very intelligent and clever. The reason why his studies have not been recognized by the Bachelor of Lectures is that the little emperor does not want to learn, perfunctory, or lazy. I will follow your majesty. Zhang Juzheng made a choice. Feng Bao quickly said, I will also follow your majesty. After lunch, Zhu Yijun rested for half an hour and began practicing martial arts. As the commander-in-chief, Zhu Shixiao was a ceremonial officer who stood outside the Wenhua Hall all along. The emperor and Zhang Juzheng were playing against each other, and Zhu Shixiao could hear them clearly. For this little emperor, Zhu Shixiao had only one feeling. He had been taught so many insidious ideas at a young age, and as he grew up, it was definitely a great calamity. But Zhu Shixiao didn't think it was a bad thing, let's just cause harm. Even the Ming Dynasty looked like this, and the harm was stronger than mediocrity. Zhu Yijun changed into a martial arts uniform, which was the clothing for practicing martial arts. He stood in the martial arts room and said to Zhu Shixiao, Marshal D, I have heard that during the reigns of Emperor Qingzu I, Emperor Renzong, and Emperor Xuanzong, he would parade his military horses and inspect the capital camp every day, which is said to be. The military appearance of the great Ming Dynasty is magnificent. During the reign of Emperor Jingtong, it was cut off. According to our ancestors' teachings, we should practice martial arts and firearms, not seek exceptional martial arts skills, but only knowledge of military affairs. Today, I worship Marshal T as my teacher, and I kindly request Marshal T to do his best. Every day, the soldiers read the military horses and only then can they know who His Majesty is. Since the Orthodox era, the emperor has never been to the capital camp again. Zhu Yijun wants to bring back this tradition. Bring back the majestic appearance of the Ming army. The glorious Tianwei of the Ming army, what a glorious moment it was. Now Zhu Shixiao bowed and said, what standard should I practice according to when I receive orders? Practice according to the standards of the Qi family army, Zhu Yijun said confidently. This. Zhu Shixiao looked embarrassed. Zhu Yijun asked with some confusion, does Tishui not know? Yes. Zhu Shixiao felt a surge of anger rising in his heart. He was the commander-in-chief and the Qi family's military training method, which was particularly effective. Of course, he had inquired, and Qi Jiguang had also written a military book. As the commander-in-chief, Zhu Shixiao naturally knew. Who are you looking down on? What Zhu Yijun wants is this fire. He is the emperor. If he doesn't ignite this fire, Zhu Shixiao won't teach it well. The young emperor is only 10 years old, but he is still too late to practice martial arts at this age. The first step in practicing martial arts is to open his muscles. Ah! It hurts, it hurts. It hurts. The young emperor kept patting his leg base, which opened his muscles and hurt even more than he had imagined. Zhu Shixiao said with an impatient expression, then stop. Zhu Yijun gritted his teeth in pain, sweating profusely in pain, but still said stiffly, keep going, give it a little bit of strength. The cavalry doesn't care about food, is it still Tishui who hasn't eaten? Ladies and gentlemen, please do not throw books on the bookshelf to eat dust. Pursuing reading is everything. Seeking support. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Again and again, no again and again. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 9. Again and again, no again and again. Empress Dowager Li, who was listening to Feng Bao's report on the banquet at the Wenhua Hall, suddenly stood up when she saw Zhu Yijun in such pain. Her face changed a few times and she sternly said, "Marshal D is so brave. Let him stop quickly." Empress Dowager Chen, on the other hand, stopped Empress Dowager Li and said, "Sister, why don't you let Empress Dowager practice? If there are any more assassins, Empress Dowager Chen will not be able to fight, and she must be able to escape. How can an orphan and widowed mother easily settle down?" Empress Dowager Li and Empress Chen hold the title of Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager Li is only 27 years old this year, and Empress Dowager Chen is only 29 years old. They have not even reached the age of their establishment. Facing the aging and sophisticated Ming court officials and the complex harem, how big are their ideas? Upon hearing these words, Empress Dowager Li sat down again and gave Feng Bao a cold glance, which made Feng Bao shiver. It was determined that such a thing would not happen again. "The method given by your Majesty is excellent. Damage is attributed to damage, and when a household is extinct, it is necessary to do so in order to make this palace, which is like a sieve, less dangerous." Chen lay on the lounge chair, swaying and speaking to Feng Bao. "Feng dying, go to the porch and find some 10-year-old Huang men to accompany His Majesty in practicing martial arts. This person is most afraid of having to endure hardship on their own. If someone eats together, it will not seem so difficult. Go ahead." Empress Dowager Li had already finished listening to Feng Bao's report. The most concerning thing for Empress Dowager Li was the words spoken by Zhang Juzheng kneeling on the ground after giving a lecture. This was the first time that Zhang Juzheng had praised the performance of the little emperor after a banquet. It has been 6 months now, and Zhu Yijun's performance has received praise from the cabinet's top aides for the first time, which is a recognition. According to the agreement between the emperor and the chief minister, there will be a school entrance examination on the 19th of each month. As long as your Majesty can focus on learning and gain the recognition of most courtiers, this country will be considered stable. As for the revival of the Ming Dynasty, Empress Dowager Li is just a woman, she actually doesn't have many ideas. Feng Bao actually didn't want to ask the eunuch to come with him, but when he thought about it, the Empress Dowager still asked him to find someone. This was an opportunity to push people towards the emperor. Soon, 10-10-10-year-old eunuchs were taken to the martial arts room, and the 10 escorted cavalry began to train the eunuchs together. The screams kept coming and going, and Zhu Yijun was a bit embarrassed to scream before. He persevered, but when he saw 10 young eunuchs shouting together, there was no taboo anymore. Practicing martial arts is very difficult. The little emperor, who had suffered so much that his veins had opened, lay on the ground, with nothing to love. Zhu Shixiao dared to train the little emperor like this, which was not ordinary boldness. "Your Majesty, why don't you take a break?" As Zhu Shixiao looked at the little emperor lying on the ground with no manners, he felt a hint of pity and fear. At that time, he was aroused by the little emperor's words and opened his veins. Although his 10-year-old body was not so painful, it was also the biggest hardship that the little emperor had ever suffered in his life. Zhang Hong stood by, feeling a bit at a loss. He quickly advised, "Your Majesty, take a break. Your Majesty is naturally brave, but the young eunuchs accompanying the drill are a bit overwhelmed." Lying on the ground, Zhu Yijun looked at his 2 big heads clung in front of him with an irresistible expression. He took a deep breath and cheered up his spirit, saying to Zhu Shixiao, "You are not in charge of military affairs. If General Qi asked you to train, you might have been killed by the Japanese army long ago, with your head stuck on a pole and wandering around the streets." Zhu Shixiao's fist is almost shattered. "What words? What are you talking about? This is..." He felt immense shame and shouted loudly, "Stand still. A quarter of an hour is a group, a total of 4 groups, start. Your Majesty, this and this." Zhang Hong couldn't understand why your majesty had been using words to provoke Tishuai and training him twice as much. It was because your majesty had the intention to touch military power and show off. Why did he have to act by example and torture himself so much? The sunk cost, Zhu Yijun has already suffered a lot in order to practice martial arts. If he doesn't master this martial arts skill well, how can he still bear the pain he has suffered? The soldiers of the Qi family came from a humble background, and only by joining the army can they afford to eat. They can all bear it. Why can't he, who has no worries about food and clothing, bear it? Zhu Yijun stood up and continued practicing. Zhang Hong passed on his words to Empress Dowager Lianggong in every detail. Empress Dowager Li finally heard the problem and asked with confusion, "My son, why is your mouth so hard? Nature is for practicing martial arts well." Empress Dowager Chen, the benevolent saint, gave an answer. Although it seemed like nonsense, it raised a doubt in the hearts of everyone present. Perhaps, what the people expect of your majesty is really a person with perseverance. The Ming Dynasty needs a monarch with great perseverance, ambition, and skills to revive the court and shape steel and iron bones. Can the little emperor in front of him really become the beloved hero? Zhu Yijun's performance impressed Zhu Shixiao greatly. No matter how difficult it was, the little emperor persevered, with his head straight, neck straight, chest tucked, waist upright, crotch tucked, and shoulders heavy. Although the posture of the little emperor was not too standard, the 10 eunuchs were even uglier. 100 practices are not as good as one stop. Standing on a post is the entry-level skill for practicing martial arts. Standing on a post is for practicing the lower body, which is unstable. Other fancy skills, such as the 5-whip leg, can only be classified as acrobatics. The bottom is stable, and the foundation is stable. Only when charging can one fiercely attack and be invincible in 100 battles. As for where to charge, it depends on the will of His Majesty the Emperor. Collect. Zhu Shixiao looked at the mist carving and immediately said when it was time. Zhu Yijun slowly stood up, with his heels touching each other, his toes pointing outward in a zigzag shape, his head and eyes flat, and he took about 10 breaths of calmness before hammering his leg. This pair of skin follicles was only 10 years old and had recovered very quickly. Your Majesty, it's time to rest. Without waiting for Zhu Yijun to speak, Zhu Shixiao immediately added, "Too much is too little." Zhu Shixiao also knew that the little emperor was provoking him, but the little emperor's mouth was too venomous. Even though he knew he was intentionally making a fire, he was still very angry. He had been practicing for 2 hours today, and if he continued to practice, it would become dark. It was too much for him, and if he was injured, he would rest for a few days, which was not worth the loss. At the invitation of the eunuch, Dr. Chen immediately leaned over and placed his hand on the emperor's pulse. After closing his eyes for a long time, he opened his eyes and said, "Your Majesty's pulse is calm and powerful, without any other palpitations. You can practice." Some people are born unable to practice martial arts, which is a sign of palpitations, probably congenital heart disease, and are not suitable for vigorous exercise. Zhu Yijun did not have this kind of problem. Pulse palpation was only the final diagnosis. After observing, hearing, and questioning, even after opening his muscles, his mouth remained stiff. When he stood on the stake, his breath remained calm. The emperor practiced martial arts, followed by a long string of big tales, accompanied by 10 small eunuchs, and the imperial physician was no exception. Chen Tai's name is Chen Shigong. Zhu Yijun moved his hands and feet. Although his walking posture was a bit strange, his young body did not feel so painful that he couldn't walk. The difficulty of practicing martial arts exceeded Zhu Yijun's imagination. If he had stood on this stance for more time, it would have been difficult for him to persevere. The little emperor is a bit overweight, and it takes more effort to stand and practice than others. Dr. Chen felt distressed in his heart. He had already submitted his resignation, but the court could not determine. It was said that both Feng and Zhang had asked him to change his medicine, and he wanted to finish changing his medicine. He quickly left this place of trouble, but as a result, His Majesty even knew his name. He quickly said, "My name is indeed Qin Shigong, but skilled in the art of solving problems." Zhu Yijun pondered for a moment before asking. Qin Shigong was taken aback and replied, "I am indeed skilled in surgery. That's it. From today on, when I practice martial arts, you'll be watching from the side," Zhu Yijun said with certainty as he looked at Qin Shigong. In terms of age, expertise, and medical ethics, Qin Shigong is a skilled surgeon. During the Wanli to Chongzhen period, he underwent surgery for appendicitis, and jijing was a surgical procedure. Moreover, Qin Shigong has conducted some research on cancer, also known as loss of honor. Only by following oneself can these medical experts unleash their lifelong abilities and carry forward the Qixing sect. Qin Shigong wanted to refuse, but couldn't find a reason for it for a moment. He was in a cold sweat and had excellent medical skills. However, it was not right to use medication or not to use medication to treat the emperor. In the Ren'in Palace incident, Emperor Jiajing was assassinated by palace maids. Su Shen, the hospital official who saved Emperor Jiajing's life, died as soon as he returned home. The imperial physicians of the imperial hospital, when seeking medical treatment for others, are always able to cure the illness with medicine. However, when seeking medical treatment for the emperor, even if they are optimistic, they will die, and if they are not optimistic, they will die. Zhu Yijun didn't follow Qin Shigong's words and said with a smile, "Then I can ask my mother for it. Bring a medical kit and follow me to the North Town Governor's office to cut the pulse for Wang Zhonglong, who assassinated me." The 5 poisons punishment of Beijing Fusher is world-renowned. Even the strongest man can become half-disabled when he enters the office of Beijing Fusher. If other cases are not interrogated, he will die first. At that time, Tishui won't be able to speak clearly with 100 mouths. The decline of the cavalry may not guarantee the safety of the North Town Governor's office. Zhu Yijun limped 3 times and walked up to Empress Dowager Li and Empress Chen, saying with a smile, "Mother, mother, the child has returned from practicing martial arts and his legs are a bit uncomfortable, but it's not a big deal. The child is recovering quickly. I've said all the hard work for my mother, but you just don't listen. I've been suffering today, will you practice tomorrow?" Empress Dowager Li felt a little heartbroken as she watched Zhu Yijun limp 3 times. There was a hint of resentment towards Zhu Shixiao in these words. Zhu Yijun said solemnly, "Practice, you won't waste a day. Then let Empress Dowager Li go." After all, she suppressed her inner kindness. Her children didn't even cry out, and practicing martial arts was also good. Even when facing assassins, she didn't feel at a loss. Zhu Yijun continued, "Dr. Chen will follow the child from now on. If he has practiced martial arts diligently, he can also take care of him. Mother is at ease. The child will take Dr. Chen to the North Town Governor's office and come back before the palace gate is locked. The ministers of the foreign court are fighting for their own interests. When they start handling this case, they will eventually break free from the party's imprisonment and have a child go and see." Empress Dowager Li looked at Feng Bao with anger. This job was supposed to be done by him, but he couldn't do it well and even gave the truth to the external court. Otherwise, where would the emperor come from? Zhu Yijun was quite certain and said, "We have found the dog food that we eat inside and outside, and the people who collude with us outside must also be found, and we will be sentenced to capital punishment to deter and punish us. Otherwise, this kind of thing may happen frequently in the future. Mother doesn't have to worry, both Tishui and Feng Daban's Jingjun will follow, and nothing will happen. Then let's go." Empress Dowager Li pondered and then waved her hand, saying, "Before the palace gate is locked, you must come back." "Well, my child, please leave." Zhu Yijun bid farewell to the Empress Dowager of the 2 palaces and headed towards the Qingtian gate. The Beijing Fusha Yamen was right outside the Qingtian Gate, opposite the 6th Department's Yamen. He didn't walk fast because his legs and feet were still a bit uncomfortable. After walking a few hundred steps, he was calm and steady. A young body recovers quickly. The cavalry opened the main gate of Qingtian Gate, and the royal guards stood in 2 rows to pave the way for His Majesty. Everyone stood straight and imposing, and once Your Majesty left the palace, they were the guarantee of His Majesty's safety. The sedan chair followed behind Zhu Yijun, but he didn't take it. Instead, he walked through the doorway and walked out of the Qingtian Gate. Emperor Wanli did not step out of the palace gate for the last 30 years, but Zhu Yijun only left the palace in 1 day. He stood in front of the Qingtian Gate, gesturing for Feng Bao to come closer. He asked in a low voice, "Feng Daban, once you leave the gate, it's the world of foreign ministers, not the palace. You can see that Mr. Yuanfu doesn't necessarily have to stand on your side, but you are my great companion and one of my people. When you go outside, no matter what, I will give you a platform. Can you give me a solid answer now, is it Chen Hong or you who did it? Whether you did it or not, this matter can only be done by Chen Hong. But if you did it, I will go back and deal with you. If the Jin party comes up with evidence that is unfavorable to you, we must prepare early." "It wasn't done by me," Feng Bao replied with great certainty. "How foolish of him to do such a thing in pursuit of Gao Gong Chen Hong. Chen Hong has lost his power. If he cheats, he can be taken down. There is no need to take such a big risk." Zhu Yijun said calmly, "Feng Daban, remember what I said. I only asked twice, not a third time and time again and time again. The Jin party is dominant in the court. You and Mr. Yuan Fu Zhang are working together to clean up the Jin party. I can understand. What I said is very clear. I asked you for the second time, did you do it? Now admit it, I'll spare your life, a word of gold and jade." No. Feng Bao didn't do anything wrong, so he naturally wasn't afraid of ghosts knocking on the door. Feng Bao is extremely meticulous in his work, but he knows even better that if one wants others to know, they must do it themselves. If he didn't do it, he just didn't do it. When the little emperor had an accident, Empress Dowager Li went crazy. Zhang Juzheng was about to fall, and Feng Bao was even more about to fall. The support of the Jin party, Gao Gong and Chen Hong, fell. The rest of the Jin party had no way to deal with it. Zhang Juzheng and Feng Bao took this risky move at their own risk, which was a self-destructive act. No matter how detailed the plan is, there may be some omissions, which is the drawback of cunning and scheming. Feng Bao and Zhang Juzheng cannot guarantee the perfect implementation of the plan, and Wang Zhonglong is the most uncontrollable variable. If Wang Zhonglong breaks into the Qianqing Palace, will he really not kill the emperor with one blow? Let's go to the Fusha Yamen in Beijing. Zhu Yijun glanced at Feng Bao, nodded, and headed towards the Fusha Yamen in Beijing. Reading is really important for the author, please support everything. Ahem. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. 1 Wave and 3 Folds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. 1 Wave and 3 Folds. Zhang Juzheng stood in front of the Fusha Yamen in Beijing, with Sifu Lv Diaoyang standing beside him, and behind the two stood the members of the Sanfa division. The court officials, including Gusholi, left censor of the Imperial Censorate, Wang Zhigao, Minister of Justice of the Ministry of Justice, Li Yuzi, left and right ministers of Dali Temple, Luo Fengxiang, and Zhu Shixiao, the commander of the Genie Guard behind Emperor Ming, and Feng Bao, the supervisor of the East Factory, jointly formed the jury for this joint trial of the three courts. The Ministry of Justice receives punishment from all over the world, the Metropolitan Procuratorate is responsible for inspection, the Dali Temple is responsible for refutation, and the three legal departments gather together. In order to welcome the Emperor's grand procession, the Jinyui North Town Governor's Office carried out an unprecedented cleaning. The windows were clean and even the corners of the walls were brushed with a pig brush, and sandalwood was lit. This originally gloomy office finally became a bit sunny. Zhu Yijun is sitting in the back hall of the yamen. He is the emperor, and if he is in the front hall, he must sit in the center position. Who will hear the case? The criminal Wang Zhonglong was brought out of the prison, and 2 inmates dressed in big red robes and flying fish uniforms were responsible for escorting them. Even if they were sent to the court, the 2 inmates were still holding on to the criminals with shackles and did not dare to relax. Tishuai Zhu Shixiao has only one requirement, absolutely not to cause any trouble at the North Town Governor's office. Smash! The culprit Wang Zhonglong quickly confessed to the truth. Who instructed you to go to the Qianqing Palace to assassinate? Zhu Shixiao was a court official, and this was the North Town Governor's office. Naturally, he was in charge of the trial of this case. With a slap in his hand, Zhu Shixiao trembled with fear and awkwardly shouted in a stern voice. Wang Zhonglong knelt on the ground, seeming frightened by this startled tree. He trembled and said, "Marshal T, the commoners are just stealing something from the palace. It's not an assassination attempt. Please be aware of it, Marshal T. Provide physical evidence." Zhu Shixiao shouted loudly. The 2 knives, one long and one short, used by Wang Zhonglong to stab the emperor were presented. The short one was the dagger used to stab the emperor, and the long one was the ring-headed knife used to stab Zhang Hong, extremely sharp. A bedboard of the emperor's dragon bed was replaced, and there were still traces of a dagger piercing through it. After Zhu Yijun woke up, Zhang Hong asked Zhang Jing and his men to remove the bedboard and replace it with a new one. As physical evidence, it was sent to the yamen of the 3 law offices. Zhu Shixiao sneered and said, "You brought the murder weapon into the palace and headed straight towards Qianqing Palace. When the internal official Zhang Hong arrested you, I was personally present. Where did you steal the property? It can't be said that you don't even look up to anything in Qianqing Palace. With ironclad evidence in front, dare you argue?" Wang Zhonglong's eyes rolled and he knelt down on the ground, shouting loudly, "The common people are soldiers of the Qi family army." The commoners were momentarily confused and believed the villain's words. It was the eunuchs in the palace who wanted the commoners to enter the palace and assassinate them, saying they wanted to scare the little emperor, so they could teach him how powerful he was. A bunch of nonsense. Zhu Shixiao sneered and shouted loudly, "Bring witnesses." Several witnesses were brought to the front of the court one by one to identify Wang Zhonglong, providing a highly comprehensive portrayal of his life as a servant in Beijing. Wang Zhonglong is a gambler who lost money and borrowed a lot of debt from the gambling house. When the owner and shopkeeper of the gambling house testified in court, they were so scared that they couldn't even stand on the road. They set up a gambling house, but why were they caught in the prison by the cavalry? The cavalry leaders did indeed lose a lot of power, but it was also in the court. In the eyes of the gambling house owners, the cavalry leaders were the direct guards of the emperor's squad. If they entered the North Town Governor's office, they would be imprisoned, all of which were the great villains and villains who executed the 9 tribes. Wang Zhonglong had to repay his gambling debts, otherwise the debt collectors would have left him with no way to go. He had originally planned to castrate himself into the palace, sell himself for money and make a profit. He searched around and found a way to enter the palace. When he heard of a big deal, he did it. Zhang Juzheng sat steady. He had read the files and found that the cavalry was still handling cases with great speed and restraint. However, all cases were handled with iron hands, and every word spoken by the cavalry was like spitting on a nail. During the reign of Emperor Jiajing, when Lu Bing was appointed as the commander-in-chief, the cavalry of Beijing Fusher was extremely popular, and even the East Factory had to give way, earning the trust of Emperor Jiajing. Few people accuse Lu Bing of abusing his power and framing, and even the most critical officials can only say one thing. Lu Bingshan caters to his wishes. As a special intelligence department specialized in handling dirty and tiring work for the emperor, Liu Bing was only scolded for catering to the emperor's wishes, which was already highly praised. There are 17 Tianwei stations, one of which has a total of 1120 personnel. The Tianwei station has a total of 19,040 personnel, and the Tianwei station under the jurisdiction of the North Town Governor has the power of investigation, which is called the Tiki. At most, the number of riders is only 600, but they have always been professional in handling cases, which can be considered as quick claws and sharp teeth. Timing Huang, exclusively for the emperor. The ability of the cavalry to handle cases is still strong, but after the death of Liu Bing, in just over a decade, the status of the cavalry has deteriorated. Who makes eunuchs closer to the emperor? Zhu Shixiao patted the tiger's gallbladder again and woke up, asking, "Who made you pretend to be a soldier of the Qi family army? Recruit him truthfully, but if there are any false statements, you will be punished severely." Wang Zhanglong saw that his identity had been exposed and knelt on the ground, crying and saying, "It was Feng Bao Feng Dadong from the palace who asked me to say that. He said he asked me to pretend to be a soldier of the Qi family army and then slandered Chen Hong. He promised me wealth and said that even if I was caught, it would be handled by the East Factory. When the time comes, send me out." Tishuai, several Minggong, "It's really Feng Bao and Feng Daying who taught me to say that." As soon as this statement was made, several ministers were discussing and whispering to each other. Feng Bao did have a motive to defecate Qi Jiguang. Qi Jiguang is under Zhang Juzheng's command. If Qi Jiguang is unlucky, Zhang Juzheng will also be unlucky. Feng Bao and Zhang Juzheng were indeed political allies, but Zhang Juzheng was first and foremost a civil servant, a grand scholar of the Wenyuan Pavilion, and a prime minister. Gao Gong wanted to seize the power of the Imperial Household Department, but as the head of the civil service, Zhang Juzheng didn't want to do it anymore. Feng Bao, as a major pendant in the palace, took the opportunity to teach Zhang Juzheng a lesson, beat him, and even forced Zhang Juzheng to investigate and interrogate him severely due to the relationship with the Qi family army. He forced Zhang Juzheng to stand with the eunuch and ultimately implicated Chen Hong in Gao Gong. Feng Bao did have a motive to do so, risking both his own and the lives of the little emperor, in exchange for Chen Hong and Gao Gong to die. Zhu Yijun sat in the back hall and looked at Feng Bao. As expected, there was indeed evidence against Feng Bao. "I don't have the courage." Feng Bao remained calm and shook his head, saying that the assassins had not even attempted to assassinate him. He almost knocked himself to death before passing the level. If the emperor really died, he would be a wild dog without his master, only a dead end. Zhu Yijun looked at Zhang Hong and said, "Zhang Hong, if you go, just say you are Feng Dabong and let him recognize you." Zhang Hong took orders and walked out of the back hall to the front hall. With a flick of the dust, he hung his throat and said, "You villain, you climb and bite recklessly. When did our family say such things to you?" Wang Zhanglong looked up and cried loudly, "Feng Daban saved me. Feng Daban promised me wealth and prosperity, how can it be different from what he said?" Zhang Hong secretly said, "It's a pity that if Wang Zhanglong denies it or hasn't seen him before, it would be enough to pour dirty water on Feng Bao." He shook his head and said, "Watch our family talk. When will we promise you wealth and prosperity?" Just as Big Companion said when he led me into the palace yesterday, Wang Zhanglong lifted his head and still insisted that it was Feng Bao's instruction. Zhang Hong took a few steps forward, slowly crouched down, and sneered, "Our family only put on the red robe yesterday. You did see our family yesterday, and we are the internal official who caught you yesterday. You keep your eyes wide open and take a good look." Only then did Wang Zhanglong distinguish that it was Zhang Hong under the dark lights of yesterday. Wang Zhanglong's face changed dramatically and he wanted to struggle. Two inmates held down Wang Zhanglong tightly. "Several ministers have also seen it, this person is full of nonsense." Zhang Hong said no more and went back to the back hall. "Are you still telling the truth?" Zhu Shixiao continued to startle the tiger and wake up to ask. Wang Zhanglong saw that his lie had been exposed, so he chose to confess honestly. He only knew that the eunuch wearing the red robe was the eunuch, so he admitted his mistake. Zhu Yijun squinted his eyes and looked at the left censor Gusholi. Zhang Hong had just left the back hall, and Gusholi's index and middle fingers were unconsciously tapping on the armrest of the Grand Tutor's chair. After Wang Zhanglong admitted his mistake, Gusholi's tapping speed increased a bit. Left Imperial Censor of the third rank, the leader of the Ministry of Science and Technology, doesn't even have the skill to cultivate himself. Among the foreign ministers present, only Gusholi is from the Ming Dynasty. Chen Hong, Ting Xiang, Meng Chong and other eunuchs were also brought from the East Factory to the North Town Governor's office by their followers, and further interrogation began. Chen Hong, do you think it was the former cabinet chief Gao Gong who instructed you to do it? Zhu Shixiao asked everyone the most concerned question. During this period of being powerless, Chen Hong's life was not going smoothly. He had no flesh on his cheeks and deep sunken eyes. He knelt on the ground and said weakly, indeed, it was Gao Gong's command. Our family has evidence. Don't talk nonsense. Gao Gongxing is a minister of the state, responsible for maritime transportation, border defense, pacifying Yunnan and Pingling, and surrendering the western invaders. How could you be so stubborn? Left censor Gusholi slammed the table and angrily rebuked, pointing at Chen Hong, his eyes wide open, obviously already furious. The Minister of Justice, Wang Zhigao, tugged at Gusholi and said, why is General Gu so urgent? Let's take a look at his evidence. Chen Hongxi looked at Gusholi. Before, Gusholi, who used to bow down and call out Chen Gong when he saw him, dared to scold herself now. Chen Hong sneered and looked at Gusholi, saying, there is a letter from Gao Gong's hand that was brought into the palace by Keihuaing. Our family recognizes his notes, which were sent into the palace by Gao Gong's family Li Shi. Our family is on the brink of death, there's no need to climb and bite. Li Shi, a member of the Gao Gong family, is still in the capital. If you catch him, you'll know with just a question. You arrogant ministers, relying on the Governor-General of Xuanda, Wang Chonggu, have taken over the business of Anda Khan and embezzled it recklessly. None of you can escape. The feeling of losing power is even more painful than death. Since there is a chance, Chen Hong naturally wants to rise again. Since the matter has been exposed, but once he dies, as a eunuch, he only recognizes a few adopted sons. What is he afraid of? He certainly wants to pull people into the water. Where is the handwritten book? Zhu Shixiao frowned, and there was no mention of the handwritten book or Li Shi in the case file from the East Factory. Chen Hong shook his head and said, it's buried under the jujube tree behind the toilet in the hallway. Zhu Yijun looked at Feng Bao, how could Feng Bao not know such crucial evidence? Feng Bao said helplessly, Your Majesty, when Chen Hong entered the East Factory, he remained silent and devoted himself to seeking death. I also learned from Meng Chong and Ting Xiang that it was Gao Gong who ordered him. Even if Chen Hong died, he refused to let me make any contribution. Yesterday, I dug 3 feet of land and had too little time to find evidence. I will send someone to collect the documentary evidence now. Chen Hong knows he will definitely die, how could he hand over the evidence to Feng Bao? Feng Bao failed to protect his majesty and lost trust. How could Chen Hong let him do a good job? Lu Shoyo, with 200 cavalry, will capture Li Shi. Luo Bingliang, you will come with Feng Dadong to collect the documentary evidence. Zhu Shixiao hesitated for a moment, but still asked Luo Bingliang, a prisoner of thousands, to collect the documentary evidence with Feng Bao to save trouble. General Gu, won't we go together? Sifu Lv Jiaoyang reminded Gusholi that the case is being handled by the external court. If the Tianwei and the palace go, if Gusholi doesn't go, the cavalry and the fanzi will work together to frame it. Gao Gong will be unlucky. Liu Jiaoyang suddenly spoke with his hands in his hands and asked, General Gu, if you don't mention it, do you know that Li Shi, a member of the Gao Gong family, is still in the capital? Or do you know that this handwritten letter is indeed true? Gu Sholi stood up and shook his sleeve, saying, what nonsense. I'll go with them. The documentary evidence was quickly retrieved, and the Ministry of Justice, the Governor-General of Beijing, and the East Factory were all staffed with handwriting appraisers. Various forces began to gather around the handwritten notes for appraisal. Before the sun had set, Li Shi was caught and brought back. He needed a guide to enter the city, and anyone who was not from the capital would have to seek refuge. It was written on the guide that the colonel of the military and horse department in the 5 cities had someone to verify and recheck his entry into the city. Even if he ran away, he could still find someone by following the clues. Li Shi was dragged in by the cavalry, his legs were already weak and he couldn't even kneel steadily. He just collapsed on the ground and trembled uncontrollably, saying, Marshal de Rome. When the grassroots entered the city, they were dismissed by Duke Gao and had no choice but to return to the capital to seek refuge with their relatives. What crime did the grassroots commit? How could they be arrested in heaven? In the Ming Dynasty, it was explicitly forbidden to enslave. In order to circumvent the laws of the Ming Dynasty, the high-ranking and wealthy families of the Ming Dynasty used their families as their pretext for accepting servants. Therefore, Li Shi was dismissed from his family and had no support. It was reasonable for him to return to the capital to seek refuge with his relatives and friends. The documents from the North Town Governor's office and the Ministry of Justice placed the evidence in front of the hall and bowed, saying, Marshal T, the handwriting is fake. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Chen Hong was shocked to hear this and wanted to break free from the hands of the fans, but was tightly pressed down by the 2 fans. Chen Hong struggled and shouted loudly, that high-arched character, I can even recognize it when it turns into dust. It can't be fake. Gu Sholi breathed a sigh of relief, clapped his hands and rubbed them together, saying, I knew that someone must have framed me. Although Gao Gong is eager for justice, he is determined not to do such a thing. Follow-up reading involves recommended arrangements, please do not raise books. Liu Bing is in charge of the Beijing governor's office and has handled many cases, but all of them have been ironclad and speechless. Liu Bing saved Jiajing's life twice. He was a staunch member of Jiajing, the guardian of the emperor, and the great gatekeeper of Jiajing. Oh, by the way, some people criticized Liu Bing for being greedy and laughed to death. Compared to Su Gu, who is half of the Songjiang mansion, Liu Bing's greed is really. I beg for all support, oh. End of this chapter.